More strangely, or it's all a matter of degree.
Keeping it going?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for. We looked at that. Okay. Let me know when you're ready, Robin. Well, yeah, I think there's other way should be. Yeah, and you still have this inconsistency. But the statute specifically. Well, that's what I told him. I said like the first thing.
Slow down. You want this? Yeah. Be careful. I'm gonna. All right. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Trustees to order at 7:35. We have a roll call, please.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. Trustee Bauer? Here. Trustee Goldberg?
Here.
Trustee Gould? Here. Trustee Levinson? Trustee Rosner?
Here.
And President Torpy?
Here.
Thank you. Adequate notice of this meeting had been provided to the press in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. In addition, notice of this meeting was posted in Village Hall, on our village website, and has been filed in the office of the village clerk. Official action may be taken at tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Can everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stay standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. A couple announcements before we get started tonight. The first is just one more reminder that Recreation and Cultural Affairs ID badges are available. You can go down to the Baird, and they are $30 per person right now. And you can find out a little more information at thebaird.org. Public Works beginning leaf and lawn garden raking they started April 2nd and they will go through May 14th. So if you have leaves, branches, anything like that, bring it out between the sidewalk and the street, but not in the street. And for the smaller sticks and branches, if you can bundle them up, that would be great. The school board election is going to be Tuesday, April 17th. The polls will be open 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. Tomorrow, April 10th, is the deadline to apply for an vote-by-mail ballot for the election. You can actually download that ballot from our website at southorange.org. I obviously encourage everybody to get out and vote. The Special Improvement District Board, we're looking for people to file volunteer applications, whether you're a property owner, a business owner, or a resident. There are seats available in various different capacities for the Improvement District. If you're interested in that, you can go to the website at southorange.org, and on the left side of the screen there's a volunteering link, and you can click on that and follow through on it. And the one last announcement I'm going to ask our Fire Chief, Jeff Markey, to come up and briefly make.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to announce that, first I'll give you a little brief history on the issue. Quite some time ago, back several years, I have recommended that we change our classification of our officers to ranks that was similar to all the departments around us. Subsequently, the negotiations was held with the board, and the board agreed sometime last year, the summer of last year. Since then, we had to have civil services approval, and we've now received civil services approval, and we are changing the ranks from captain and lieutenant. Lieutenant is our company officer. Captain was the shift commander. The terminology now will be captain on the company officer and deputy chief as the shift commander. This brings us in line with everyone around us, and with the increased use of mutual aid, several fires recently. Fire in Jersey City over the weekend went to 9 alarms. Jersey City. So it's advantageous for us, for safety purposes, that we have a similar structure so that things will run smoothly on the fire ground. And at this point, Civil Service has agreed with us and has certified the change for our officers. And I'm pleased to say that it's now completely done after a long, arduous path. Sometimes things like this, the little particulars of it take forever. But you will see differences with the rank on the street. You'll see their nomenclature change on their turnout gear and their helmets and such.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, that was our last announcement. We have a proclamation this evening that I'm excited to be able to read. I know we have a couple guests here tonight who I'm sure are planning on staying for the whole meeting, not just this. This is a proclamation celebrating the 5th annual Komen, North Jersey Race for the Cure. Whereas breast cancer is the leading cause of death of women between the ages of 35 and 64, and increased public awareness of this disease, its risk factors, and symptoms may save lives of women across New Jersey. And whereas Susan G. Komen for the Cure, North Jersey affiliate, is dedicated to education and research about causes, treatment, and a search for the cure. And whereas the Komen National Race for the Cure series, an event of the Susan G. Komen for the Cure, is the largest series of 5-kilometer races in the world, raising public awareness and much-needed funding for breast cancer research. And whereas on Sunday, May 6th, runners, walkers, survivors, co-survivors, and volunteers will unite at a new race location to be held at the Essex County South Mountain Recreation Complex for the 5th annual Komen North Jersey Race for the Cure 5K certified run, 5K walk, and 1.5K fun walk event. And whereas last year, the Susan G. Komen North Jersey Race for the Cure brought together thousands of women, men, and children from northern New Jersey and beyond, and raised over $1.4 million for the North Jersey service region to help fund breast cancer research and provide local community life-saving education, screening, and treatment services. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of Trustees of the Township of South Orange Village that Sunday, May 6, 2012, is Susan G. Komen North Jersey Race for the Cure Day in South Orange. And be it further proclaimed that all South Orange citizens are encouraged to participate in the Susan G. Komen North Jersey Race for the Cure to help raise funds and awareness for the fight against this life-threatening disease, to join the celebration of survivorship, and to honor those who have dedicated their lives to researching, treating, curing, and caring for victims, and to those who have lost their battle with breast cancer. Sure. Would you like a copy of this? Sure. Sure, absolutely.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, you sit next to the microphone.
Well, first, here's a T-shirt for you. Thank you.
How'd you know his size?
It's probably smaller than this.
As long as it's not the junior size.
Thank you.
Had to give you a name and address to it.
Thank you for letting me come speak. I'm Lisa Renwick. I'm the co-chair of the Race for the Cure. This will be my 3rd year as the co-chair, so I've spoken with you before, and I appreciate you letting us come back again. I want to say, to add to the proclamation, this is also a men's disease, and it's becoming more prevalent. So this isn't just a women's disease. Men out there need to know that 1 in 1,000 men will be diagnosed with breast cancer, 1 in 8 women, and 1 in 7 in New Jersey. So more than ever, we need your support and help. In light of all the crazy media that's been happening, I would tell you that I'm in it for the people that need our help, and we need your support, because without it, we will not be able to fund the grants locally here in our communities to give the services, provide the treatments
presentation this evening. I'm Adam Lerner from Seton Hall. I'd like to come up and share what's happening up on campus.
Good evening. How are you guys this month? I have a few updates. As Alex said, I am Adam Lerner from Seton Hall University. A couple updates for this month. We have some new acquisitions in our Valentine collection in our library, which is Italian history, World War II, and its aftermath. It's a great collection of historical facts, pictorial works, and actual personal accounts of what took place. And it's a wonderful collection. We invite the community to come up. If you have a Rebel card, or if you just like to come in and go through the books and kind of check out the history, it's a wonderful collection that we have. On Friday, April 13th and Saturday, April 14th, Seton Hall University is hosting a Relay for Life. This is something that will start in the evening at 5 p.m. and go to the next morning. Each year, it is a very well-attended event by our students. They raise quite a bit of money for the American Cancer Society. It's a wonderful event to really celebrate the people who have gone through and survived and done well, but also remember the people that we've lost with cancer. And it's a wonderful event. They have different activities throughout the night to not only keep people awake and moving all the way around the track. It's an indoor track, but we also do some very touching and moving speeches and talks. So that's quite nice. Something a little different, we have a lecture series called Solar Power at St. Peter's. The Center of Catholic Studies presents a spring 2012 lecture entitled Solar Power at St. Peter's. It's the Catholic Church and Sustainability. We have lectures once in a while from our Catholic Studies. They put on a great series. This should be a wonderful talk about solar power and sustainability that the Catholic Church has really kind of taken on. The last thing I want to do, as I mentioned in my March update, was about a map we were producing for two events in South Orange. The first one is for the Pirate Preview, which is April 15th, and it's an exclusive day for students who have already been accepted. So they've been accepted on kind of early, the early application, but they get to come to campus and check it out. And the other date that we're hosting is Saturday, April 28th, which is our open house. So it's people who are maybe interested in the university who want to check it out. With these two events, we have about close to, say, a little under 3,000 people coming to campus. Students, their parents, and their families to check out what Seton Hall has to offer, but more importantly, and also what South Orange has to offer. Because part of a decision with a family and a student coming to an area is to not only look at the university, but look at the town. Seton Hall's, our admissions asked to put together a nice map of the community, and we got help through Main Street South Orange. They gave us a wonderful map. We decided to go around and try to get as many businesses to participate and give us some coupons. If parents go to each of these businesses, they will get whatever discount if they have the map. And so we're going to really try to encourage all the families to come down, check out the businesses of South Orange and the wonderful shops and restaurants we have. And hopefully they will pick Seton Hall to come here that next year. So that's all I have for my April update. Yep. You can just press it down.
Yeah, I do have one comment. I'd like to thank Seton Hall for allowing Stan and myself to come down and do a network review with your technology officers. It was very helpful, and look forward to more interaction.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we have minutes for approval tonight from the March 26th meeting. Is there any discussion, or do we have a motion?
Move.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. We have a public comment period. I just want to make a note of this, as this is a slightly different format than we've had before. In all the meetings going forward from this point on, there'll be two public comment sections in each meeting for people. There's going to be one at the beginning of the meeting before the board takes any action, and there's going to be one after all the action before our discussion. So people are free to obviously speak in either. I'm assuming most people want to speak at the first one, but just to make sure that people have an opportunity to speak before we do anything, and then also if they have comments afterwards. I don't know if we have the sign-in sheet from the back. People are signing in right now. We have to do like the Apple Store when you go in and you type your name in, it comes up on the screen.
Just take a number.
That's true. Not quite as impressive. So I'm just going to ask, as I call people up, if you can limit your comments to 3 minutes, as we do have a number of people who want to speak tonight. Clarence Jones. And when you come up, if you could just say your name and your address.
Good evening. My name is Clarence Jones. I live at 321 Irving Avenue, South Orange. I'm here to address an issue that has existed since approximately October 31st of last year. Between the house address of 345 and 349 in the street, there's a pile of branches. The pile is approximately 19 feet long, 5 feet at its widest point, 32 inches at its highest point. It is in the street, on the grassy section, and on the sidewalks. There are approximately 15 to 20 kids that live on that street between the ages of 2 and 12. And obviously they go to school every day, and they have to walk past this pile. The residents on 2 occasions, or 3 occasions, have noticed the DPW pull their truck up, sit there for a few seconds, and then leave. I personally contacted Inspector Singleton, I believe his name is, who came out the very next day that I contacted him, issued fines and citations. I called the DPW as late as last week and as early as December. There clearly is a turf war between the DPW and the inspection department, code enforcement. I say that because in my last conversation, which was last Tuesday, I was told that it's in their hands and we don't know what's going to happen.
That's what DPW said.
Yes. I spoke with a young lady, I believe, out of the administrator's office. Although I told her this had been in existence since last November, she told me to be patient. And I asked her, 5 months, shows no patience. I didn't get an answer. I have my children here tonight because I want them to see how government works in this country. I'm a retired public engineer, 31 years, and trust me, if where I worked a problem existed for more than 5 months, this simplistic in nature, there would be some concerns. I would hope that no other resident has to come to you about this problem because 5 months is more than enough. Thank you.
We will definitely look into that, and if you want to leave your contact information with the clerk, we can get back to you when we have when it answer what's going on.
Oh, I'm sorry, I left off one point. I also told them if it's not cleaned up by tomorrow, I would do it myself.
Or you shouldn't have to do it. We'll look into it. And if you leave your contact information, we'll get back to you. With the clerk right here. Thank you. Bobby, were you aware of this?
It's the first I've heard of it.
We'll look into
I've heard of
it.
it, but we'll take it.
Mr. Jones, thank you for bringing that to our attention. I don't think any of us here were aware of it, so thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Okay, Nancy Gagne. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Gagne. I live at 96 Plymouth Avenue in Maplewood. I'm here to talk about the Community Coalition on Race. The Coalition on Race's guiding principle, as I think most of you know, for advancing true inclusion for all residents is intentional integration. Many communities are diverse, but few are integrated. Living in one of the most segregated states in the nation, we can see what an anomaly South Orange is in this region. Through the coalition, we strive to build a community in which people of different, the light is dim, sorry, in which people of different races and ethnicities live together, interact, form friendships, and participate fully in the community's economic, political, civic, and cultural life. An integrated community is not sustainable without intentional effort. People who don't know our towns are often surprised to see that the attitude about diversity and inclusion is different than in most places across the country. Conversely, people who choose to live in our towns these days have a high expectation that when it comes to diversity and inclusion issues, we are sensitive, proactive, engaged. In other words, residents expect that someone is making it work, making it happen. And the Community Coalition on Race is that someone. Many of you have heard the term first suburbs. South Orange and Maplewood are first suburbs, towns built adjacent to or near cities, and with age now experience a unique set of challenges. According to the Brookings Institution study, I'm going to quote from them, first suburbs are highly racially diverse, more diverse than the nation as a whole. They are also home to some of the most expensive housing, the most highly educated residents, and those with the highest incomes. And yet, despite these positive trends, first suburbs are staring down a set of looming challenges that threaten their overall stability. Expensive housing presents mounting struggles regarding affordability, especially as poverty increases in these places, despite a decrease nationally. There are also tremendous racial disparities in first suburbs, and the high incomes and education levels found there are not shared equally among all residents. In short, first suburbs are highly complex. That's the end of the quote. And we're very familiar with this here. The unique challenges indicated by this study are the reasons that the Community Coalition on Race was formed. Our community is approximately 56 or 57% white, 34% African American, about 5% Hispanic, 3% Asian, a little closer to 4% after the last census. Over 18% are foreign born, and we have a growing Haitian and Nigerian population, one of the highest in the country, even for our two small towns. We have 5 Title I schools, and well over 19% of the student population is eligible for a free and reduced lunch. The Coalition, in its work with Barbara Heisler and Fund for an Open Society, was the first organization in our state to shine a light on this issue. Other towns across the state are looking to us for the strategies to handle some of the first suburb challenges. Over 15 years, we have developed a unique approach to building a suburban community that is racially integrated and truly inclusive. This is truly a community-wide service that strengthens relations between people of different races and cultural backgrounds, and that contributes to housing market stability. Who's going to do that work on behalf of our towns? We've been before you many times to present our services and our outcomes. I just want to call your attention to some of those services that we've honed over the life of the organization that are not being provided by other community groups or municipal departments. Through our Realtor Advisory Group, our prospective homebuyer tours, and our marketing efforts, we contribute to the demand for housing. Just some of the efforts that came out of consulting with the realtors over the years include the Columbia High School beautification effort. This was to make the grounds of our flagship school more attractive. The, quote, Eastern Strategy effort to get more people interested in homes in neighborhoods like Tuxedo Park, that's just one example, which did become more integrated as a result. And our current effort to get the good word out about Clinton School to attract more interest in the surrounding neighborhoods. And these were things that came directly out of conversation and work that we've done with the realtors. And as you know, our MLK observance and volunteer service weekend is popular not only with residents, but with people and leaders from surrounding communities. In fact, each year Congressman Payne was sure to be at our observance. It's a high-quality, inspirational event that has provided our towns with the visibility they deserve. People see firsthand that there's a genuineness to the cross-racial, cross-religious, and cross-cultural relationships that we build. The authentic nature of those relationships is so evident that day. But that doesn't happen just because we hold the observance once a year. It's due to everything that we do throughout the year. The MLK observance lets us take stock. We celebrate how far we've come, and we're honest about how far we have to go. For over 15 years, our marketing efforts in local, regional, and national media have made these towns known for all the great benefits of a mature suburb that's close to Manhattan. Our marketing makes it possible for anyone who already lives here to brag about the benefits of living in an integrated community, and for anyone thinking of moving here to see that our towns are serious about quality of life concerns. Finally, we don't work alone. We partner with local and regional organizations to fulfill our mission. Within the community, we support neighborhood associations, build interfaith connections, and develop partnerships between schools and parents. We collaborate with realtors, local service, arts, and civic organizations, municipal leadership, and the school district. On a regional level, we've had a number of partnerships. One example I want to share with you that you may not know about, we're the fiscal sponsor for the Essex County Choral Project. This is an outgrowth of the Coalition's Voices in Harmony project. Their main event last year, held at the Newark Museum, included 8 large choirs, a presentation by Dr. Clement Price, had over 500 people from around the county in attendance. This event alone gave South Orange and the work of the Coalition high visibility and positive attention in Essex County. We've also worked with the Ethical Culture Society, Leadership New Jersey, the Junior League, Building One New Jersey, that's the organization focused on first suburbs right now, the United Way, the American Conference on Diversity, and Plant Smart New Jersey to extend our strategies of intentional integration to other arenas. Who else could do this work, the work of intentional integration? We have the experience and the passion, and we're asking tonight for you to support it for the benefit of South Orange. Thank you.
Patricia Canning? Okay. Cantor Perry Fine? Okay. Suki Shakar? If I could just ask everyone to try and keep the comments to 3 minutes. Okay.
So I will just speak from the heart. I'm a resident of South Orange for the past 27 years. I reside on Crestwood Drive in South Orange. I'm also a local realtor, and I specialize primarily with my business partner, Heather Gilhaney. She's from Maplewood, in serving the South Orange and Maplewood communities and selling specifically South Orange and Maplewood. This is what we sell. We sell to people who, like ourselves, embrace diversity. This is a very unique community, and our unique sister community, Maplewood, where we embrace diversity every day in what we do. We could not sell that if we didn't live it ourselves and really feel passionate about it. The Coalition for Race has been incredibly instrumental in supporting this belief system for all realtors. They provide us with many different venues in which we can participate, including focus groups, so that they can hear the concerns of future buyers and future residents of the town who might be interested in settling here. I just encourage the town to continue supplying us with this invaluable service that they provide so that we can continue to keep the diversity of South Orange and Maplewood alive. Thank you.
Thank you. Meredith Sue Willis.
I'm Meredith Sue Willis from South Orange. I've lived here for going on 25 years. We always strive with the Coalition, and I'm also here to ask once again for you folks to put us back in the budget, keep us in the budget, and support us. We always try to give a very balanced, racially balanced group who comes before you. Tonight you're getting mostly white ladies, but you know, we're willing, we're here, we're speaking, and I've been thinking a lot about this since we began hearing that you were likely to take money away from us. Been thinking about what the Community Coalition on Race does for South Orange. And one of the things I thought was how South Orange, like most municipalities, gets its services from all kinds of places. We get our services from companies, from profit-making companies. I mean, I presume you don't, I presume you buy your supplies, your toilet paper for the town hall from some private company. I assume that you, and I know that you also buy services from some nonprofit organizations. I know that some of the recycling comes from, goes through one of the nonprofits. And it seems to me that the reason to fund the South Orange Maplewood Community Coalition on Race is that we are specialists in the things that Nancy Gagne was talking about. We're specialists in intentional integration. We've been doing this for many years, and we do it in many ways. The towns around the country that are roughly comparable to South Orange, places like Shaker Heights, Ohio, Oak Park, Illinois, these places do their integration work through municipal budgets. You do yours, or you have up to this point, by getting services from the South Orange Maplewood Community Coalition on Race, and I think you're going to be making a big mistake if you pull away from this, because without intentional work on racial integration, a community will begin to fall away from that kind of thing. This is a matter of quality of life in our town. People come here, people come to this community because it is an integrated community. This is a place where we are proud to have our children because we know they're going to go to school with many different sorts of people. I'm not going to say some of the things I was going to say about the things that the coalition does because Nancy Gagne covered a lot of them. I want to speak really briefly about something that happened a week and a half ago that the coalition did. We had an event that was, it was two of the things we do well. One was, it was publicity, good marketing for our community, and the other thing was frank and candid conversation. We had a meeting in the library of Columbia High School. We had an event called Columbia High School, Facts, Fears, or Folklore. More than 80 people, families who were considering whether or not to have their children use our high school, came to this meeting, sat around tables. Students from our high school gave up their evening and came and sat at these tables. Volunteer facilitators sat at these tables and led discussions about the things that people say about Columbia High School that are true, the things that people say that are sometimes made up, and sometimes things that are lies. They talked about the high school. We had a candid conversation, and people went away with a sense of what a fantastic place the high school is, where people can talk like this, where children of all races can come and speak articulately about what their community is like. We even had a woman come from Brooklyn, New York to this meeting. She had heard about it over the internet from the coalition's website. She came to this because she's thinking about moving to this community. She came to see us in action. I'm going to stop speaking because I know that at least one of our other speakers is here, but I just want to say that if you all turn away from integration, I can only say shame on South Orange.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Yes. Okay, just come on up.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Patricia Canning. My husband and I are residents of South Orange, and we've lived here for about 6-7 years now.
Just make sure you speak into the mic.
Okay. We have 2 daughters, a 4th grader and a 2nd grader. So I feel, are established here in this community in South Orange. We love this community and what it brings, what it offers. And I'm here to talk about my experience with the Coalition on Race. I guess the first thing we should recognize is that integration is hard work, right? There's the concept of bringing people together, different backgrounds, different economic levels, and however we choose to define our differences. The work is hard, it's difficult, it's not easy. If it were easy, we would see it throughout. When we throw around the word diversity, it would mean nothing to people. We would know what it is because we wouldn't have to define it. but still, it's something, it's work, it's has to be done, and the coalition is taking it on, right? They're making it happen. They're creating the space, they're creating the place in our community, which makes our community what it is, to have those conversations about race, to have the conversations about what makes us different, and to take those conversations and say, you know what, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. What we do is embrace who we are and move forward as a community. And that's what the coalition does. When the coalition has an event, such as talking to children about race, I don't know how many of you have heard about that, but it was a very well-attended event. Everybody wanted it. People wanted follow-up, because talking to a child about race is a difficult thing. How often are you able to do it in a way that doesn't, quote unquote, define you as a racist, or bring race up to your child in a way that you can't explain? So we created a space for people to come and talk about race. And when people attend a coalition event, they know that it's going to be a place where they will be respected for their views. There's no need for them to defend who they are, what they bring to the table. It's about the conversation, it's about the issue, and they know that they'll walk away getting some real information about how to deal with a particular issue in our community, and specifically about talking about race. I don't know that there's another organization that offers that. In many of our churches and temples, perhaps, particularly in this community, because of the work that the coalition has done. Yes, our churches and our temples and our places of worship have become places where we can actually talk about race because of the things that the coalition has done. But you won't find that in other places. And I think for us to put dollar signs around the coalition and what it does, and not understand the depth of what it brings to our community, is short-sighted. We have to think further. We have to think of ways that we in this community could never have something like a Trayvon Martin discussion. We should never have to go there, because of the work the coalition is doing, and how we perceive race, how we perceive cultural differences, how we perceive integration and diversity. And that's what the coalition is bringing to our community.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Perry Fine. For the last 19 years, I've served as a cantor, Congregation Bethel in South Orange. But I come here this evening not just as a cantor, but as a musician and as a citizen of this township. The Coalition on Race is one of the jewels of this community. South Orange and Maplewood are known for racial diversity, and I don't think this would be possible to the extent that it's possible without the work of the coalition. About 12, 13 years ago, Jason Asbury, myself, Cantor Ricky Lippitz, we formed a group called Voices in Harmony. This group has served this community through concerts, through singing at the Martin Luther King celebrations, commemorations in January, Interfaith Holocaust service. But really, in its inception, it really was tied to the coalition. Because if you looked at our group, you would see not just Jews and Gentiles singing together, but you saw black, white, you saw diversity. And so what the coalition has done, they've helped sponsor Voices in Harmony. They helped sponsor, I think, which is perhaps the greatest musical and community event in my 20 years here, that is Two Towns in Harmony, the big concert that took place, 7, 8, 10 years ago in the park. And that project was brainchild of Barbara Heisler Williams, who was then the head of the coalition. And it did great, great work. So it seems inconceivable that South Orange would not support this organization because it's done so much. It's enriched the lives of this community. It's enriched the lives of Jews, Gentiles, black, white, anybody who's been here. So I hope you'll continue to support the coalition and continue to make South Orange what a great community is because of its diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Just come up to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Alyssa Aronson. I'm a longtime resident of South Orange. I have 3 words. Fund the coalition on race.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Diane Lloyd. I'm the Executive Director of YouthNet. I didn't know if I'd be speaking before you tonight, but it appears that I need to. As you know, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having the foresight for the past several years to fund YouthNet. We have had a tremendous growth year this year, and as our service level agreement points out, we are well on our way to being self-sufficient. What we have done this year with our clubs in the middle school is enormous. We grew from 4 clubs to over 15 clubs in the fall, in the winter, and now in the spring. We have served over 600 kids this year, which is tremendous.
Just make sure you're speaking.
Oh, I'm sorry. We never dreamed that it would grow like this, but the response at South Orange Middle School has been overwhelming. We tried to do a small fundraising campaign with the parents at the middle school, and the response was enormous, and we're going to increase that fundraising effort again in September. So, fortunately, I think that we will be able to be self-sustaining in the very near future. We're not quite there yet, but I think we're going to be. As you may remember, we were given the contract for the after-school program by the school district. So now not only are we running clubs, but we have put in place the YouthNet model at both middle schools for an extended enrichment program where kids come to us right after dismissal until 6 o'clock. We have teachers on staff there now that provide tutoring, and so kids have the clubs and then they get homework help. And with the advent of the IB program in the middle schools, YouthNet's role will be enhanced. We're working with principals at both schools to try and incorporate that into the program as well. We not only are active at the middle schools, but we also run a mentor and internship program, and South Orange Township has been very helpful in that and taken YouthNet interns the past several summers. We have put a training program in place there, giving kids some interviewing skills, some self-awareness skills, some techniques for promoting themselves in the work environment, and we're going to increase that again this summer. So it was a small program when we began. It was 12 kids, and now we have 40 kids. And we're growing, and that's what this is about. So position and not have to come back next year. But right now, we're here, and all I can say is I hope that we remain in your budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Diane, I have one quick question. You've said it several times in your comments about self-sufficiency.
Yes, yes.
I know you can never predict the future, but is there a possibility that next year that you could be self-sufficient? Is that kind of what you're working towards?
Yes, that is exactly what we're working towards, and and one of the ways we can do that. See, last year when we took over one of the programs, and we inherited the program, so a lot of the parameters of the program had to remain the same. Going forward, we're going to be able to tweak the program so that we're hoping that by doing that and marketing it successfully, and then continuing our development efforts, we will be able to be at, we're a nonprofit. We're never going to make money. We're just going to, break even, and then any excess we have, we'll plan to put back into enrichment programming. So, we're hoping that will happen. And if the numbers bear out and we can market ourselves successfully, I think we'll be there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Good evening. My name is Kathleen Hester. I teach at South Orange Middle School, 7th grade social studies, and this is my 3rd year involved with YouthNet at the middle school. As Mrs. Malloy just said, we started out as a very, very small group, one club, for the last 2 years, and this year we've worked really hard with both the faculty and students, and we've opened up 14 clubs in the fall, 15 clubs in the winter, and we hope to run 15 clubs again in the spring. And it's only through the support of both towns, Maplewood and South Orange, that we've been able to do this. I'm not here for the politics, I'm here for the kids. And I can tell you that we've reached over 250 to 300 kids already this year, just offering these programs. That's 1 hour of structured time after school for kids to do something that they like to do. And that's because of your direct funding, and I just want to thank you and hope you do it again next year.
Thank you.
Jeff DeBoe. Where do we start? The CCR, founded 15, 20 years ago. Initial mission, to integrate the community, basically as realtors for steering, and they did a great job. They had a purpose, there were good people that were involved. Somewhere along the line, that got derailed. They strayed from that initial mission, and in the last couple of years have become a political organization, an organization that lobbies, an organization that's caused a lot of divisiveness in this community. And, it's unfortunate because there's still a lot of good people that are involved with the organization and believe in it. One who just spoke before, Camden Perry, fine, but the gentleman I have a lot of respect for. And I think he was involved really early on. There's a lot of people really have kind of missed what's gone on the last couple of years. Well, it's disturbing to me. Over the past couple of weeks, the CCR has paraded individuals up here to tell you about their good deeds over the past 15 years or 20 years, and to implore you to give them money. I find that a little bit disingenuous. They're asking you to give them taxpayers' money, because you're the stewards of the taxpayers' money. Well, the organization is strayed from representing all the taxpayers in this community. And all the people that have come up here in the past couple of weeks, not one person has said, you know what, we've made some mistakes and admitted some errors along the way in these last couple of years and said, you know what, we're taking steps to correct that. We'd like to get back on our mission and be worthy of the taxpayers' funds and represent all the taxpayers. It's a hard decision you have, and it's not fair to punish another group that's actually doing good work in the community, such as YouthNet, because they are not political. So I would urge this board at this point, until the CCR can readily admit that they're going to get get back on track to their mission to represent the community and not be political, not to fund them. Last year, they sponsored a Board of Ed debate. Well, there's a Board of Ed election going on right now. I don't see them sponsoring any debate. That's great. That's great. I stand corrected. I stand corrected. My apologies. Okay? But I think they basically need to get back on track before they're worthy of public funds. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a debate at Marshall School this Thursday at 7:30. 7 o'clock, okay. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to speak at this time? Okay, seeing as there are no more members of the public who wish to speak, I would like to close public comments and move on to our ordinances that are on first reading this evening.
At what point do we want to, obviously, at some point we have to discuss these topics. Do we want to do it now, or do you want to do it in conjunction with the budget? But at some point...
The budget.
We'll do it together with the budget. That's fine.
We have the first ordinance tonight. Art, please.
Yes, thank you. We have ordinance 2012-06. This is an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of South Orange Village, subsection 92-166F, to permit vacant storefronts to be covered by alternate means.
Thank you. This was an ordinance that was discussed our last meeting that the board wanted to list for first reading this time. This basically, just to remind the public, gives store owners or property owners the option of going to Main Street or another part of the special improvement district, subsidiary of them. Instead of putting up black paper on the windows and the storefronts, they can opt to put up poster artwork or something that's worked out with the design committee. And the intent is to then see this strengthened when the special improvement district does take effect. So I'd like to open this ordinance for board discussion or a motion.
I'll move. A second.
Okay, do we have a roll call vote, please?
Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
And Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Thank you. So ordinance 2012-6 did pass upon introduction. We have a second ordinance for introduction tonight, ordinance 2012-07. This is an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of South Orange Village, Chapter 47, Sections 47-1, -3, -4, and -7, to bring the regulation of satellite antenna into compliance with federal law and to make other necessary amendments.
As the title says, this is just bringing our ordinances up to code, basically. We discussed this on our last meeting as well and wanted to introduce it tonight. I don't know if there's any discussion on this or a motion.
I just need a point of clarification. Does this deal with the other issues regarding, okay,
No, this is very narrow.
This is housekeeping.
pardon me?
Housekeeping.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
And Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Thank you. So ordinance 2012-07 passed upon introduction.
Thank you. Trustee Davis Ford? We're going to read the...
I move that the ordinance 2012-06 and 2012-07 be set down for a second reading and final passage at the May 14th meeting of the Board of Trustees, and that a public hearing be held at the time. Excuse me, I'm fighting an awful allergy. That the village clerk be authorized to take necessary action regarding public notice of such hearing.
Was there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, so tonight we are introducing the 2012 municipal budget.
Correct.
Trustee Levinson?
I move to introduce the municipal budget on first reading.
Did we need to do,
We do have a
first
resolution that would allow us to introduce and read it by title rather than read by the entire, which I'm sure Mr. Trustee Levinson would be happy to make that.
Right.
We've got to read
That's
it last year.
2012-076.
Okay, so there was,
Yep. Would you like to read it, Trustee Levinson, or? Let me get to the book. This is a resolution to read the 2012 municipal budget by title. Whereas NJSA, New Jersey Statutes Annotated, Title 40A, Chapter 4-8, as amended, provides that the budget shall be read in full at the public hearing, or that it may be read in title only if, 1, at least 1 week prior to the date of the hearing, that's the public hearing, a copy of the approved budget shall be made available for public inspection in the free public library, if any, of the municipality, and in the free county libraries or regional libraries located in the municipality. Or, if no county libraries or regional libraries are located in the municipality, the county or regional library of the county in which the municipality is located. And the public officer delegated responsibility for delivering copies of the approved budget to such library shall forward to the governing body an attestation that each such delivery was made. And also B, is made available to each person requesting the same during the said week and during the public hearing. Now therefore be it resolved by the governing body of the Township of South Orange Village that it hereby declare that the conditions of NJSA Title 40A, Chapter 4-8, as amended, set forth in subsections 1A and 1B, have been met, and therefore the budget shall be read by title only.
thank you.
So, and you will get a certification and attestation from my office at such time of the public hearing.
Okay. The 2012-76 was moved.
Yes, I move it. Well, why don't we do 77 as well, which is the introduction of the budget?
Well, why don't we do 76 first, and then we can do 77 and discuss it.
Second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't
There was a motion to adopt resolution 2012-76, which was seconded.
Which is
Just to read.
read the by title.
I mean, we can take a voice vote for this, correct?
Yes, please.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
We also have Resolution 2012-077. This is the resolution by the Board of Trustees of the Township of South Orange Village to introduce, or what we call approve, the 2012 municipal budget.
Do we have a discussion on the budget itself? Barry, do you have anything?
We could do that after someone moves and seconds it, and then we can open it up for board discussion.
Yeah, I move that the budget be accepted. It's both the current and capital budgets.
Correct. Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
Now we're discussing.
And now we can discuss. And if the administrator would like to give a brief introduction to the budget.
Yeah, I was going to provide a brief overview. I did not have an opportunity, again, as you know, this has been a fairly compressed schedule for me to put this together. It's been an incredibly challenging budget year. I did look back and come across, I think on the website and then internally, my predecessor, Mr. Gross, actually in his budget presentation PowerPoint that's on the website, had predicted the 2012 budget to have a 13.3% tax increase, and he had it at $2.85 million gap, and then later Mr. Burkholder had a PowerPoint that he had it at a $2.6 million gap, and they were both pretty much right on the money. I actually came up with a $2.9 million gap was my starting point. So it was principally driven by revenues and shortfalls in revenues, and I've outlined this all in a detailed memorandum to you, which I won't reread all the details, but for the benefit of the public, based on the results of last year's operations and particularly the tax appeals and some of the impact of those appeals, we ended the year with less surplus balance available, and consequently we could not anticipate as much as we did in last year's budget. So that was over $500,000 revenue that we're starting in a hole. Our court costs and fines and costs collected were down, so there was a shortfall there. We are taking some steps in addressing that. I'm optimistic that that'll be back on track, and through the first 3 months it appears to be. back up to the more historic levels. The single biggest obstacle was the use of revenue last year from the sale of municipally owned property. That was basically a one-time revenue, was not available for use in this year's budget. A couple other items, our community development block grant was down slightly. Receipts from delinquent taxes, that's really the most bittersweet because the tax collector had such an outstanding collection rate last year. That was great news for last year, but this year it leaves less delinquent taxes available to anticipate as revenue this year, so that was down almost $200,000. We had some appropriation increases that were not really within our control. One related to the allocation of certain salaries between the capital budget and the current fund budget, and I've explained that in more detail, but I really felt that that was an adjustment that needed to be made. We got an increase in our assessment on the joint trunk sewer, which is not something that we really have any control over. It's a bill that we get and we have to pay. You recall last year there was no funding for the capital improvement fund, and the balance heading into this year was only a little over $300. And as you're all aware, we need to put a 5% down payment for any of our capital programs, so we couldn't have a capital program. So we did include additional $150,000 in funding for this year for that item. And then lastly, our municipal debt service is up $276,000, which again is not an item over which we have any control, and it's debt payments that are due. So those items all together, which I refer to as the negative items, put us in a $2,998,000 hole. But there was some good news. We did have some revenue lines that were increased. Our sewer user fees were up. Our construction fees were up. We had available some additional capital fund surplus, which I explained in detail, resulted from the way the notes were sold that yielded a premium instead of a lower rate. So that money is appropriately basically transferred over to the current fund to pay the interest on those notes. We anticipate the new pilot coming on board from the Sterling property, so those provided nearly $1 million in revenue increases. A number of our appropriations we were able to decrease. We did get a huge break from the state as a result of the pension reform legislation, which increased the contributions that the employees pay. Combined, that was about $500,000. Our health insurance is actually down as a result of again, the legislation that went into effect last year on employee health contributions, and that's actually a phase-in, and this is really the first year of that phase-in, and that is going to increase and almost double next year, and then the next year to go up another 50%. So that promises to yield some relief for years to come. Our overall GIF insurance assessments were down about $90,000. So the total of the positive items were $2.55 million, with the net result being an increase in the levy of it's 7.9. I think the document and I'll explain in a minute, the documentation that I provided you was 1.82. I think it's actually turned out to be 1.79. There was a tweaking of the reserve for uncollected, which is a mathematical calculation. When I got the final number from the auditor and plugged that in, it adjusted it by about $5,000. So all in all, I'd say 1.8% increase in the levy. I should note that as far as the tax levy cap, the statutory cap, because the two items, the capital improvement fund and the debt service alone, total approximately $425,000 and actually exceed the total increase in the levy, we are actually in a negative cap percentage. So the 2% tax levy cap isn't an issue at all. We're actually negative there. So the 1.8% is actually in the overall levy. On the average assessed home, that would result in an increase of $83.01. Obviously that's more than I would even like, but under the circumstances where we started, I think that this is responsible. It maintains all of our current service levels, it maintains current staffing, it anticipates and provides contingency funds for outstanding union contracts that are under negotiation. Again, it provides our capital improvement fund, and it's responsible in the sense that the surplus that I anticipate will regenerate this year, we'll be able to have it next year. One of the things I make it a point to do is not have a one-year fix that's going to create a bigger problem the next year. And I'm comfortable. It's tight, but it's very responsible. Overall, when you net out pass-through expenses where you have an incoming revenue that's directly offset by an appropriation that's earmarked for that, when you net all that out, our overall budget total, our expenses and appropriations are down $1.1 million. I'm comfortable that everything's provided for in the budget. I would be apprehensive to go any lower because I think it would position us, kind of put us at risk for next year and make it that much more difficult, and they tend to build on themselves when you kick it down the road. Couple minor points. There would be, from the version you had in front of you, what I would want to urge was one is a change in the reserve for uncollected taxes, which I believe what you had in front of you was the figure was 960,000 and change. The new calculation is $954,440.78. So that's a minor adjustment. And the only other thing that I'd like to do at this point, and this I didn't include it originally because I knew the grant was awarded last year, so I thought it had already been appropriated, would be to add in, again, it would fall on sheets 9 and 24 of the state budget document under the public and private offset by revenues. It would be corresponding an appropriation in the line item for the FEMA truck grant in the amount of $665,000. It has no effect whatsoever on the tax levy because you have a $665,000 appropriation for the grant and a $665,000 revenue. So it's a wash, but because it was not included previously, we needed in the budget to be able to charge against it for the grant. So those would be the only two changes to the document that you were provided. The capital is as provided, but I did provide you tonight. I had the opportunity to finish up the 5-year plan, and also at Trustee Levinson's request, I brought into the single cover page the detail of just this year's budget, which was taken from that larger sheet that's been bounced around for quite some time now. But it outlines the very specific items. For purposes of the state budget document, it's the bold main head titles, which is the only detail you need at that level. But this gives you the breakdown of the specific projects, and again, those do track. The only change there, I think, from the one document was the ADA accessibility on the pool had to be shifted to this year. It was originally slotted for next year, but there's some time sensitivity to the requirements of the ADA. But other than that, the main totals are all the same as what you were previously provided, and this just provides additional background detail. So that was basically my synopsis, and then I'm more than welcome to answer any questions you have.
Do you, Mr. President? So, just to recap, by state statute, without going to the voters, we're only allowed to do an increase of the municipal levy at 2%, right?
Well, there's a tax levy cap. There are certain exceptions, and you're allowed to make adjustments. And as I pointed out, our total levy is increasing 1.8%, which is $370,000. But two of the items, the additional debt service, and the additional debt service, $277, I think, and the additional capital improvement fund of $150 is about $420. So that actually exceeds. So if you do the cap calculation, we're actually in a negative percentage. We're below zero.
Oh, okay.
Our overall increase is 1.8, but from the cap perspective, it's driven by the capital improvement fund and the debt service.
Okay, I wanted clarity on that.
Barry, first of all, thank you very much for that summary and for all your work on this. I think you've come quite a ways and done a yeoman's job of getting your arms around it, so thank you. I did have one question. On the breakdown, the budget and actuals, there's one line item that just jumped out at me, jumped off the page. And the mayor and council line went from $909 to $4,000, a jump of 340% increase. Can you explain what that is?
Well, this was, you'll recall, at a meeting, three meetings ago, in connection with, I think, some of the charter issues and the discussion of the stipends. What came to my attention was some of the trustees indicated that they previously had incurred expenses and that had difficulty getting them reimbursed because there didn't seem to be any line to charge it against, and there was some time delays, and people were going to have to, quote, find the money. In my experience, everywhere I've been, there has always been an operating expense line for the governing body in recognition of there are seminars you attend, registration fees, things directly associated with it. And without having a specific line to charge, it's not as clear. And so that was my attempt to provide a clear spot where, when there are legitimate expenses the trustees incur, there's the appropriation to charge, and you charge the line. So I'm not really sure where the $909.09
It was $1,000, then it got cut 10%.
Well, it was about, yeah, plus we weren't spending $1,000, so we just cut it 10%. And I did, and by the way, I did ask the CBAC, I haven't heard back yet, to do to come up with guidelines on reimbursements for expenses without prejudicing the conversation. I just asked them to come up with what they consider guidelines and what would be reasonable expenses.
areas that may come up, that we have some other potential areas of reduction, but I think this is a good starting point. If there are reductions, it will go into our surplus for next year, which will just continue on supporting what we need to do for, especially next year.
I did want to talk about the elephant in the room, about all these folks that have been coming forth talking about funding. So if we may, I think now is as good a time as any to talk about this. We've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, but I think we need to finally bring it to a head. So I took some time earlier just to sort of refresh my own memory of kind of how we got to this point. And the timeline that I recall, I mean, I'm shocked that we're still talking about this in April of 2012, because I thought we had put this to bed in July of 2011. But so just for the benefit of the folks in the room and the folks that have spoken or the folks watching, just wanted to recap some of the sequence of events. Last March, at the March 3rd, 2011, we talked specifically with respect to the coalition, the idea of providing them physical space in a village building in lieu of financial support. We bantered that, we came up with that idea, shared that with them, but it wasn't really, finalized. The coalition actually has their minutes posted on their website, and I took a look at their website today, and in May and June, their minutes reflected they were accepting the offer of space in a village facility. July 18th, 2011, budget workshop. There the consensus of the group was that as of January 1st, 2012, there would only be in-kind office space plus telephone and utilities with no monetary spending, no monetary funding. And we instructed the administrator at the time to communicate that, which he did 2 days later. We then, apparently later in the year, it came up that the request was still being questioned. So we discussed it again. I looked at the date. It was January 23rd, 2012, an executive session, and we agreed to maintain the same position we had agreed last July. And I focus on the coalition for the moment. I do want to talk about YouthNet, but they were really separate and distinct, so I think it's worth talking about them separately. One thing I want to say, because this is such a sensitive topic, but the coalition talks about being able to talk openly these things, and I think we should be able to. This was never about, the mission of the coalition, as people have talked about, person after person that stood up. This was a financial decision. It was about doing things more fiscally responsible. And by providing support, this was not about not supporting the mission. This was about providing support in lieu of monetary spending, and monetary funding. And that support would equate to essentially 50% of the monetary funding that was being offered. So by providing space and telephone and internet, that would be about $10,000 or $12,000 that the coalition is spending today that they would not have to spend because the village would be providing that in lieu service. A couple of things jumped out at me that just further troubled me. I was looking through again the minutes of the coalition on their website. In December of 2011, they changed staff status from contractors to employee. And as a result, I looked at their budget today. Their budget increased by about $7,500 for additional payroll taxes. So the budget's going up, and Nancy, I would love to, maybe not this moment, but I'd love to understand the rationale for that. When times are tight, the last thing we want to be doing is lavishing on benefits and employee status for people and moving away from contractor status. I think we want to be cutting expenses. So, in my opinion, this decision had already been made last year. It was less clear with YouthNet. So, my opinion is we deliberately had this discussion last July in order to be compassionate, in order to give the coalition 6 months' notice so they could ramp up their fundraising and give them enough time to sort of recoup for the $10,000 or so loss. From what I could see, we were not as clear with YouthNet, so shame on us for that. We did not, I don't think it was communicated to YouthNet last year, but I think as Diane said earlier, they're on the path to self-sufficiency, and hopefully, argument's sake, if we were to say right now, this is it, this is the last time, it's very feasible next year they wouldn't need the funding. I haven't received the same message from the coalition. I mean, we've been funding the coalition now for 15 or 20 years, and I don't see a path to self-sufficiency. So, you know, one last point I wanted to make. Again, this was never about the value that the coalition provides. Again, we heard from a number of the speakers. I rattled off a list last year of a number of organizations in this town that we all support, that the town does not provide monetary funding. Achieve, the Adult School, First Night, the Jersey Animal Coalition, Jesby House, the Lions Club, Montrose Park Historic District Association, South Mountain Peace Action, South Orange Historic and Preservation Society, the Rescue Squad, although they now are asking for money. It's a different topic we'll talk about. South Orange Rotary, and the South Orange Maplewood Interfaith Holocaust Remembrance Committee. I think we all agree those are all very valuable organizations that provide value to the committee, to the community. So this is not about value. This is about, you know, fiscal discipline and responsibility for the taxpayers. So, you know, my opinion, in my mind, we made this decision last year for the coalition. We gave them notice. I think it's only fair now to sort of put YouthNet on the same notice for next year, and I think that would sort of, you know, get us out of this business altogether of supporting charitable organizations that are doing good work, but we are the fiduciary responsibility of the taxpayer money, and we just can't be supporting charitable organizations that way.
I do want to make one quick point and defer to trustees for further discussion, but a decision wasn't made in the budget workshop. You know, that's a meeting that's not noticed for action. There was no motion, there was no vote. So although the board could convene in that setting and express their intention to make a decision, the decision is tonight.
Let me just be clear, consensus was reached and it was communicated to the organization multiple times thereafter.
I just think that as far as being clear, it's an important distinction that a decision wasn't actually made. We can't make a decision like that in that setting. The decision is made up here when we vote. Although the intention was...
Now, we can make a decision if we vote on it here.
And the clarification was that we had asked the administrator at that time to notice those organizations of our intent.
Through you, Mr. President, I'd like to weigh in. I agree with the trustee Goldberg that we had this discussion from being fiscally responsive to the challenges that we are dealing with, like multitude of municipalities. And my recall or recollection, and I think the minutes will bear, and whether we communicated to all the other organizations, that's another discussion. However, all the organizations that do valuable service to the quality of life in South Orange that Trustee Goldberg mentioned is true. However, we're dealing with precedent, and the precedent of the organizations that we've supported, besides SOPAC, which is a whole separate situation itself because we own the building, was YouthNet and Coalition on Race. Both are incredible organizations. And YouthNet, I remember being active when they first launched. And it really was difficult for me when we made the decision, it was across the board. When we made the decision, and the minutes will support me, that we said that we will not, as of 2012, because for the fiscal challenges that we face, we would not fund any of the organizations. And it broke my heart, but I had to make those tough decisions, and I supported it. I think the Coalition on Race is an incredible organization also. And they are one leg of a three-legged stool. Midtown Direct, along with the Coalition on Race, and a couple of other entities are responsible for why we see South Orange today. But once you get through a viable integration, not diversity, there's a difference between diversity and integration. I won't go into that here. But we are who we are because it's continued work, and I like analogies. And analogies are, a good marriage is only good marriage because you continually work on it. So if you achieve what we've achieved here through the Coalition on Race, along with the other entities, you can't say, oh, we got here and we don't have to do any work. It's continuous. YouthNet is incredible because they bright students get resources, and the people who are either financially or intellectually challenged get resources. That 60 or 70% get ignored, and it hurts a community, and that's what YouthNet does, and does fabulously. So with that stated, we made the decision, and the minutes will bear, that we were not going to fund Indy. So my only position is, because I am a fan of both, and I helped in the beginning launch YouthNet, is that we either going to support both organizations because it's a perception of fairness, and perception is brittle, or we're not. And that's my position. So we're either going to fund both and say, and give them notice that this is it, you have to be self-funding in 2000, or we're not. We're not going to fund one and not the other, because it is the perception of fairness. Because the minutes said we weren't going to fund any in 2012, and that's my position. Because I think they're both incredible. Both incredible. Both incredible. And my only position is, because I'm a fan of them both, we're either going to fund them both or we're not. And that's it.
And I don't know that I agree with tying the two together, and I didn't agree with it when we talked about it last July, and I know that at least 3 trustees did. I also agreed to cut the funding way down, as whatever you had suggested last July, to the number that you had suggested in addition to the space. I also agreed for YouthNet to be funded this year, because they did say they were on the path towards self-sufficiency. I also want to point out that YouthNet was a slightly different variation. It was a program that we originally were going to start through our recreation department, became a shared service with Maplewood towards a whole organization that provided a very tangible service and benefit, which we have a service agreement, which we never voted on, but we do have that service agreement. And it was something that we put forth. If we decide not to fund YouthNet, if the board decides not to fund YouthNet, I would put forth that we should then put that program back in the recreation department and fully fund it and hire YouthNet as a part-time employee, if that's the way we're going to go. Because I just don't see how you tie things together and just pick these two out of a hat for whatever reason it is. Let me finish. And I didn't agree with, and I think you and me were the only two who voted to give some level of funding to the Community Coalition for another year, to wean them off to get to that number, because we thought the drop was too great in 1 year, and to get them to that point where they could be self-sufficient or sufficient without the money from South Orange, or look for other sources of money. And I still feel that way. But I don't agree to tying the two together.
Trustee Goldberg, I would just ask that the minutes be
And look at him
prepared
when
for
you talk
that.
to Trustee Goldberg.
I mean, I'm sorry, Trustee Rosner, I'm sorry, Michael. Trustee Rosner. Pardon me? But no, this is serious. Again, I think they're both value, and I truly believe, because up until the last couple of years, I came from the corporate environment, and all the business agreements I had with my clients were service level agreements. So I think funding should be based on clear and concise service levels agreements. What is each organization going to deliver to improve the quality of life for our community? What is the ROI on our investment? I'm there with you. All I'm saying is, whatever you're saying in your position is still the perception of fairness. And the perception of fairness is powerful. And we have to be perceived as fair. And if I recall, if my recollection is clear, and I believe it is, the minutes will show in those budget meetings that we all, as an organization, agreed to eliminate funding.
I won't disagree.
And will you not agree?
I won't
Mr.
disagree
Lobo?
that maybe a majority said that, but I did not agree to that.
I'm pulling up the minutes now, Deborah, and I'd be happy to read them.
We did it at the last meeting. We read it, and there were...
It's a little unclear. It was clear, as the way I read it, with respect to the coalition. It was less clear with respect to YouthNet. That's how I interpret them. In all fairness, but you're welcome to look at them.
I think there are a couple points that are worth making as we have this discussion. I mean, obviously, I don't have a vote on this, but I do think that clarification is necessary on a few points. One is that, and it was the word charitable contributions was mentioned a couple times over the course of the discussion, and nobody's talking about charitable contributions. We're not allowed to make charitable contributions. That is against the law by the New Jersey State Constitution. We're talking about contracting for services.
Yes.
And they're services that are either provided by the municipal government, or they're services that are provided by a for-profit or a non-for-profit. It doesn't matter which.
Right.
And that provides a service that our taxpayers use, and that's why it's part of our budget. And that goes for for-profit and non-profit. There are a number of nonprofits that do get funding, including the company that does our recycling that happens to be a nonprofit, and including the Rescue Squad does get an in-kind contribution, and so did the Jersey Animal Coalition when the building was built on that property, which was a joint deal between South Orange and Maplewood. So there are plenty of nonprofits that do get funding because sometimes it's a valuable way, just like the improvement district, which we just passed not more than 2 months ago. There are some things that government doesn't really do that well. I know that probably comes as a shock to some people. And sometimes it's better to let citizens in the nonprofit world do those things, and we'll give the money and you guys do it because you do it better than we do it. And it takes it out of the bureaucracy, and that's important.
And takes it out of pension and insurance.
Right, right. And so there's clearly, a possible value to that. I think we have made that value of doing that clear. And I would suggest that, as we're having this discussion, that we think about formalizing the way that we do this and making sure that that we're not picking one or two out. And SOPAC I would include in this discussion, and Main Street and the Improvement District and all these organizations. They're all under the same headline of an organization that is contracted for services with the municipal government. It doesn't matter if it's large or small. And we should have a policy.
Not the finance department too, then.
That's well, I don't know if they're a nonprofit, but they're a private company.
It's an outside service being.
It's an outside service, and we could go down a list and probably name a dozen outside.
As a village attorney.
That's also true.
That's
So I think that this should not be decided based on one organization or other, but we should decide
As a policy.
a policy about contracting for services with nonprofits or for-profits. We should create that policy, and then we should discuss what organizations and how the application process works and how an organization becomes part of that. I want to make two other points. Someone personally, I work in the nonprofit and the fundraising world myself. 4 or 5 or 6 months is not really enough time for a nonprofit to ramp up fundraising to become self-sufficient. And self-sufficiency is great, and obviously, YouthNet is talking about doing that, and that's an excellent thing, but there are plenty of incredible things in this country that are not self-sufficient, that do not earn a profit, like government, for example, and that provide very valuable services like healthcare, and that we subsidize because the cost of subsidizing it is less than the cost of not subsidizing it. So I think it's important to think about that as well. And one last point on the issue of the offer of space to the Community Coalition on Race. I remember that was part of the budget workshop discussion. I don't think it's as simple as we've kind of talked about it so far. And I want to hope that all the board members understand that, that when the offer of space is made to an organization like that, that as I understand it has a pretty good deal with their space currently, that it's a very, very big decision to up and move. And the offer of space, although well-intentioned on the village's behalf, is not actually as great as it seems, because you're going to be asking an organization to give up space that they currently are guaranteed and move to a new space in a town that they're not getting funding from anymore. And the, secondary or tertiary elephant in the room is that obviously this is an organization that's supported by both Maplewood and South Orange. So if South Orange doesn't give a financial contribution, people in Maplewood may say, well, if they're not giving the contribution, we're going to go down to the same. So actually the $1 that we take away is actually $2 that we take away. No, it is. Don't shake your head. It is absolutely. I apologize.
You're speculating.
I'm not speculating, actually.
You are speculating. You have no evidence that whatsoever. Don't tell me what to say or think. You're speculating.
I'm not speculating. If an organization like the Community Coalition on Race that receives funding from 2 towns, and one of the towns cuts the funding, it's expected that the other town would do the same. I'm not saying that they would, but if they, let me finish, if they did, the $1 that we took away would in fact be $2. That's not speculation.
We used to give the same amount as Maplewood several years ago. We no longer do. So we cut their funding. Maplewood did not. So your argument does not hold true.
It does, because again, I'm not saying that that's 100% something that would happen, but I think that would be likely to happen, and I think that we have to think about that. It's important that we not make it simple. I'm sorry, could you stay off your phone? It's important that when we talk about these things, that we're not making too simple of rationale, and that the offer of space was, again, well-intentioned, and I certainly supported it when we first talked about it, but then as I learned about the entire process, it's actually a little more complicated, and the offer of space isn't worth as much as we thought it was. So if we wanted to, like you said, that it wasn't a lack of support, if we wanted to give that amount of financial support, then we should give that amount of financial support and have no strings attached. Or give the full support, whichever one we choose, but again, if it's about the money, and there's you know, the money that we've talked about here, I don't know if it's $3 per household. We're talking about the 22.5.
That's completely irrelevant. We could say that about everything. Let's hire more cops. It's only $4 more of a household. That's ridiculous. Those arguments mean nothing.
That doesn't sound like a terrible idea, actually. I think that when you talk about the amount of savings of cutting the funding like that, I mean, you're talking about $22,000. You know, we could have, you know, not done the feasibility study of selling Village Hall, which, you know, was not particularly productive, and we could fund an organization that some would consider very productive. So I think that when we talk about the amount of money that we throw here or there, the $22,500 in a $33 million budget is, you know, is kind of a drop in the bucket.
The organization's been funded for, what, close to 20 years? Do the math. It's almost $500,000 over that period of time. It's not exactly a pittance, as it was referred to once before.
But over 20-something years, you're getting that total dollar, but over the per year cost is a lot less. You can use statistics to spend and support whatever you want. But the value they brought over the 22 years, they were, like I said, it was not one variable. It was a multi-pronged effect that saved and made South Orange it is today. And one of those, or the three-legged stool besides Midtown Direct, was the Coalition on Race. Now, let me just go a little further. Why do we need, we're a very diverse community, but what makes us unique, and I don't know any other community, you can look at Maplewood, you can look at any other, Montclair, even Maplewood, they have, and I'm going to be very blunt, and this is why I love South Orange. They have a white section, a Hispanic section, a wealthy section, whatever. In South Orange, they're as far as cost and architecture, there are 4 or 5 districts. There's Newstead, there's the Tudor, what is it called, Tuxedo Park, there's Montrose. I don't know of any other community in this area, in Essex County, that no matter what the housing stock is or the economic demographics is fully integrated, which is different from diversity. There's no black section, Hispanic section, or white section. That is unique, and that just doesn't happen. Just like a good marriage, it takes continuous work. So we've achieved that. And one of the things that the Coalition Race has done is help achieve that. And how? Is communicating and talking about race. Talking about race. Part of the problems of miscommunication and these silos happen because we don't talk about it. And they facilitate opportunities for people to talk about race. Now, I don't know if anybody here has observed, but I'm the only person of color here. I have a level of comfort with each and every one of you because I was brought up by my family to be comfortable and be able to talk about the elephant in the room. Years ago, I can't say it now, I was often the youngest. Lord help me, it doesn't happen now. I was often the only female, and I was often the only black. I was, in 1993, I'm dating myself, I became the first female and black president of the Newark Rotary Club. You think Newark, whatever, but the Rotary Club had only recently let, in the 80s, females in the organization. But because of my ability to talk about things, people, the white males who dominated the club, were very comfortable with me because I made them comfortable because I was able to talk about things. And they elected me as their first female and African-American president. That's the value that happens in South Orange in an organization like the Coalition as on Race. If you are here because you see a value, because you're here, because why in God's name, unless you're a masochist, would you pay the brutal taxes here? You're here because of not only the diversity, but the integration, and that we can talk about things. It is important to the culture of South Orange that we enjoy now, that we have someone to facilitate the ability to talk about race.
Deborah, the key point is...
And that's the service and level agreement that we need to say, what are you doing to help facilitate?
Nobody is taking that away. In the net, we're talking about a reduction to their budget of $10,000, a budget that just went up by $7,500 by making their employees employees.
But you know, we're not far off the same page. I'm saying that if, because I'm also have, as an elected official and responsible for the budget, the fiscal thing, I'm there with you. But I'm saying is, either we're not going to fund anybody because that's my understanding of what we agreed with, or we say in 2013, hey, you're on notice now, on record or whatever, you're not going to get it. That's all I'm there. I'm not far from you. But I'm saying, first of all, I want to recognize that value, and YouthNet. YouthNet, I love you. Because I understand what happens when you don't pay attention to that 60% in the middle. But all I'm saying is a perception of fairness. We're either going to treat these organizations because we set precedent and we have a history of funding, or we're not. That's it. That's it. I'm not far from you. I'm there with you. But I'm saying either we're going to do both or not. I'm not far from you. It hurts me that we have to make those decisions, but we have to do the financial or the fiscal responsible thing to do. The only way I differ from you, Trustee Goldberg, is either we're going to fund both organizations or we're not. That's it. And everybody's on notice that CCR and YouthNet, 2013, you better get your fundraising together. That's all I'm saying, is either we're going to treat them both equally and fund them, or we're not. That's my position, and that's it.
And again, we're not that far apart. The only distinction I would make is in 2012, that message was communicated to the coalition, that effective January 1st, let me just finish, effective January 1st, 2012, that was it. I don't believe, and I could be wrong if someone can prove it otherwise, I don't believe that was ever communicated to YouthNet. So I'm sorry to use your argument of fairness. I think it's unfair to cut YouthNet off at the knees now without any advance notice, whereas Coalition did have 6 months advance notice.
Let's just accept that as a fact, then that's our problem. So what was wrong with us why we would communicate to one organization about, hey, we're stopping you, and we didn't communicate to another organization?
Well, we'll blame John, he's not here.
All right,
I don't know.
It doesn't matter, because if it wasn't equally communicated to both organizations, because I remember the discussion was even including Main Street, that we were not going to fund Main Street, YouthNet, or CCR. And so if we fail to forget one, then we own that, and then we have to bite the bullet, then make a clear policy going forward. So it's either everybody or nothing. And our thinking in fairness with Main Street was that if we were successful with passing the SID, Main Street was going to be folded into that. I remember all of that. And it really was very tough for me to be intellectual from a fiscal point of view and step away from the emotional and the benefit, the quality of life that they delivered, and make that tough financial decision. But I did. And I did it because I was assured that we were going to do it for all. And that's how I was able to do that.
Again, the thing I would dispute when you again talk about fairness, we offered the coalition space in lieu of funding because their budget was structured very, very different than YouthNet. Quite frankly, I would love to make the same offer to YouthNet, but I believe they're working out of Diane's basement, I would guess. I mean, I looked at their budget. I don't see rent expenses or telephone expenses, so we can't offer them the same deal. They're different organizations. They have different cost structures.
Even the in-kind was like 50% of what we were giving them, right? So if you're going to give 100% to YouthNet, then if we're being fair, the in-kind plus the financial dollar where they were 100% should be given to CCR. That's consistent. So what is the funding that we were giving to CCR?
22.5.
The in-kind was half that, right?
roughly.
All right, so 1,100, right? 11,000 should be in addition to the in-kind for 2012, then that would make them whole and give them notice for 2013, and we give the full 15,000 to YouthNet. Or we give nobody anything. That, to me, is fair. And if we did, and if we did not communicate, if we communicated clearly that this is what we were going to give to CCR, but we failed to communicate those things that I understood that we discussed to YouthNet, then it's our fault. We failed.
Can I talk about the communication to YouthNet for just a second?
Sure.
A couple of months ago, Alex had asked me if I could help YouthNet and sit on their board. If I had any indication that we weren't funding YouthNet, not that I don't love you, YouthNet, I wouldn't be sitting on your board. I mean, I clearly had the understanding that we were continuing to fund them this year. Otherwise, I never would have made that commitment to them.
Can I ask,
So-
I'm imposing you, so forgive me, but I'm not sorry. What do you recall, Trustee Bauer?
I think, as we discussed last time, we have differing interpretations and recollections about the minutes. Even when the clerk reread the minutes to me, we made a decision, as Mark pointed out, even though we are voting tonight, we made a decision to not fund nonprofits, which is how we looked at it, and at the time. And I just want to say one other thing in response to the village president. It was really only the year before when I brought the suggestion to the budget workshops that we started talking about having not interlocal, but service level agreements with any organization other than Main Street, which already had a contract. And it was in that budget meeting that we started discussing, well, what exactly are the services that this organization provides, and this organization, we attempted to negotiate those services. There was pushback on the services. It's a much longer conversation than I realized that you were not exposed to in those other budget meetings, but all of that certainly led me to understand that we were adopting a policy of not any longer making what clearly in the past was a charitable contribution to nonprofit organizations. We were going to stop doing that was an absolute policy agreement that doesn't preclude in any way, shape, or form either a competitive or possibly a sole source service level agreement for particular things, and I would certainly support that in the future. And one of the other things that I think we should, that is incumbent upon us, obviously, as based on all this discussion, is that we should have a workshop with the nonprofits that we have funded in the past to try to identify sources of funding for them, because while Diane Malloy has been very open about moving toward being sustainable without our support and has clearly understood that direction, I haven't gotten that from CCR at all. So I want to make sure that everybody's moving in that direction, that everybody has support from us. It's not particularly important to me anymore after so much discussion whether it happens this year or next year. My recollection, since you put me on the spot, is that it was clearly going to happen this year, but it doesn't matter to me. I don't want to be, I'd rather be fair, as Trustee Deborah Davis Ford says, and if fairness includes because YouthNet didn't have the notice that I thought everybody understood was going to follow from that meeting, then I'm okay with this year. Trustee Levinson, I understand your motion to approve this budget would include funding for both groups.
I'm assuming that some of that funding is
that
still there.
correct?
That's correct, as proposed in budget.
Yeah.
And by the way, we do have service level agreements from both organizations, but we have not accepted them as a board yet.
Yeah, and I don't find them acceptable, at least one of them.
I'd like to make a comment to that as well.
Okay, as soon as you finish your comment, I call the question.
I make a distinction between service level agreement and contract. I think it's appropriate for government to contract for services that government would perform. I think one of the things that government has outsourced is YouthNet. Some of the functionality, as Mark said, would have been in the recreation department. I'm not looking at it as charitable donations or donations that we're giving to organizations. I look at it as an alternative way of supporting a particular function which would have been government, except we decided to go an alternative path and having it outsourced. Instead of saying service level agreement, I tend to say we contract for services and we measure how well they perform with the service level agreement. So there are a set of characteristics that we put in the contract. Here's the set of things that we're going to contract for. And it's described in a service level agreement. Says this is how well you met it. And the next go around, you can then measure against that and say, do I want to continue on going with that contract or find another alternative way of doing it? We could insource it. We can put it in the recreation department, as Mark says. But I think those are the alternatives. I think the CCR does a wonderful thing for the community. I don't know if that is a function of government, and that's something that we should be outsourcing to a third party. And that's what I bring to question. Whereas YouthNet, it is a function that we had within government. We changed some programs, and we look to YouthNet to fund those, or to operate them. What they're now looking for is some funding. There's a difference, and that's, Deborah, I have just a slight different bent on how that's approached. I think, in my mind, they are performing a function that government should have been performing.
Howard, I don't disagree with you at all. I hear you. And again, I want you to understand in context. I understand that because that's what I lived all my professional life. I come from the corporate world up until the last 3 years. I'm in government. So I understand exactly what I lived and died by service level agreements. Again, gets back to perception. And no matter what you say, the perception is if we had agreed on this, then we need to demand from CCR the same service level agreements, and I do believe they serve a value, and if they can present that, but my understanding is we had the discussion, and we were going to cut all funding. Even with YouthNet, we were going to cut those fundings. So if that, we need to clearly define our policy in that way, and I understand that. That's how I earn my living. But because we did not make it clearly to everybody, then as we form our policy going forward, in 2013, we need to do that. But in 2012, either we're going to support the services of both organizations to us. This is my opinion, or we're not, because we were not consistent in communicating.
I don't know what the definable government services that the CCR would be performing for us. I saw what Nancy had sent about YouthNet and what they were putting together as a contract for services to be provided to government, and I understand that. And I'm not trying to distinguish. They are services being performed by some outsourced agency. I don't care. If it is recycling and it's going to first occupational, they're a nonprofit as well. But they are bidded contracts. They're outsourced solutions, and they're performing a function that is an alternative to government. And I'd be willing to fund that. I have no problem with that. The difference is that I'm trying to understand what are the government functions that CCR are going to perform. I think they're wonderful, but what are those functions? There are alternative funding sources possibly for them. I've offered them as maybe in kind from real estate. They're out selling homes for people, for brokers or real estate agents. But they are creating revenue streams. That community should be participating in part of the funding for them. We should see that coming from that group, and that's where I come from. And if I could see what that government function is that they're looking for us to support, then I would not have a problem with it.
I think before I ask for a roll call vote on this, in a moment, I do want to say that as far as the procedure, I mean, tonight would be, the motion that's on the table includes funding for both organizations at their levels from last year. So I just want to make sure that that's clear to people voting on, that are about to vote on this.
It's an appropriation.
Right. And the second point is that subsequent to tonight, that I think it would be under the board's purview and it would behoove this board to create a written policy as to how organizations or private companies apply to be part of this contracting relationship, and create that policy, and that would be something that this board could and should do after this point.
Yes.
Well, I would amend that I would like to see us creating an interlocal agreement, because these are tripart groups where we have Maplewood and the school district participating in it. And we should have an agreement between the three parties. And what we are paying to get provided to the village.
I agree.
I think that makes sense to think about as part of that policy discussion. So with that being said, could we have a roll call vote?
Have a roll call vote.
We're voting on the motion that was seconded to introduce the budget and schedule a public hearing for May 14th.
But does that still leave the not-for-profits up in the air?
No, it includes
That includes they're in funding for both of them in that budget.
It's the appropriation of the budget subject to an agreement being signed.
That's correct.
Well, and I would add, there isn't a line item appropriation, it's all within an administrative OE appropriation line. So
If we don't come up with an agreement, or an agreement isn't passed by a majority of the board, then that money just stays in the budget.
and either use for something else or reverse to surplus when unspent. I mean, there's not a line item on any of these.
But is this discussion on these two groups going to circle back to us again?
Well, I certainly think at a minimum it needs to circle back, because under any scenario, I agree, and again, I think the process was started, and I think everybody now fully understands that there can be no charitable contributions, no philanthropy with taxpayer dollars. I think everybody understands in terms of paying for services, it doesn't matter whether you're for-profit or non-profit, it's just, are you providing a service that is legitimate governmental service? What is that service? And then ultimately, it's a policy decision for the trustees to decide. Anybody could come in and offer us all kinds of services, and we only have so many dollars to spend, and only so much taxes you can take from the residents. So I think clearly it needs to come back. And then ultimately, as I say, there is no line item in the budget. So the fact that there is funding available in the budget doesn't commit, and I certainly think that there would have to be at some point a formal written agreement. This is what you're providing, and an understanding this is what it is, and ultimately a majority vote of the trustees that you believe those services are worth whatever amount you agree to fund or not.
I would actually suggest that if this budget passes the way we're discussing now, that the service level agreement or contract, I want to get into the semantics of what we're going to call it, be that we have something at the next meeting, which is the in-between meeting, to vote on, to make sure we all know what we're voting on our second reading of the budget. Because I don't want to leave anyone hanging, not the CCR, not the YouthNet, or this board, or the residents.
I would support that.
And I think that way it'll be very clear in identity. And we may say that even though there's $20,000 or $15,000 for a group in the budget, we may say that agreement is only worth $10,000 to the village. It may not be worth the full $15,000.
Right, and the other thing I would add is if the budget is introduced tonight with technically that funding in it, albeit not by line item, and then we have that conversation, and ultimately the trustees decide on some lesser level of funding or no funding.
Right.
That adjustment to the budget can be made at the time of the public hearing without the need to reduce. You can reduce any appropriation. You can't add. If you want to add more money, we'd have to go reintroduce.
Well, we can leave it as surplus.
Well, you could leave it in there, leave it as surplus, or I'm not in favor of overtaxing people just for the sake of having surplus next year. So if you're not going to spend it, I'd say amend the budget and delete it. But,
And is there any issue with passing a service level agreement in between introducing the budget and adopting it, or contract? So we could pass a resolution in the next meeting authorizing you or I to execute a contract with an organization using funding that we haven't actually adopted yet.
You're not
up and adopt a resolution.
Yeah,
so
you wouldn't approve it,
Right,
but I
okay,
think,
so that's-
yeah, I mean, because you have to
that's
available
what
funds, but I
Trustee
I think-
Rosner had suggested.
Well, I think you certainly inform.
It's
that
such
you
a-
could agree that that's acceptable, you don't actually authorize the execution unless.
And I actually want to put one more wrinkle into this, since the rescue squad is requesting a sum of money for a letter that I think we all got today, an email letter.
Yeah.
Which I want to make sure that if, I mean, are we discussing that later tonight? No? If we're not discussing it tonight, then we should be discussing it at the same time next week, and it should be coming out of the same line item of the money. So if we know there's a total of whatever X amount of dollars it is, then how we're going to divvy it up, because there's not another $10,000 hidden in the budget, I don't think. If there is, let us know.
But a good point, Mark. I was going to bring that up. The tough one with that is we've yet to see any financials whatsoever. We haven't seen a
But they have
budget.
2 weeks to do it now.
Yeah, we've seen nothing other than a letter today.
Yeah, so, and you know, the representative wrote the letter, and the president of the Citizens Public Committee, and the two of them should be getting together, because I think they sent it out together, the email, and let them come forth with the justification, what's different and why they need the money this year. And we know what the services that the rescue squad provides to us, but we can spell it out in an agreement the exact same way, if that's the way we decide we want to go.
This should all be done uniformly as a policy.
Although I don't think Alex should be allowed to participate in that discussion. I mean, I'm not, because you're a member of the rescue squad.
Can I ask the administrator, is the money for the master plan in this proposed budget, the update of the elements of the master
You better talk to the mic so that we
I have included money for the master plan and also for redevelopment council, and I think those are the other two major.
Barrett, I sent you an email, but I didn't get a response. There is no money for a downtown business recruiter that we had talked about last September, is there?
And I had that I thought was subsumed into the SID, at least that was my understanding, that was one of the items within the SID's budget.
Well, the question was whether the village would be funding it or whether the SID would be funding it. We discussed it last September, and the agreement, the intent was that the village would be funding it. But the minutes say, it will be discussed at a next budget workshop, and never got discussed further.
But we said partial funding, I don't think we said complete funding. Whether it shows in the minutes or not, I think that's what we said.
Also, might I just make a point? Mr. Rother pulled me in the back room, you all saw that. I wanted to clarify that I am the liaison to USNet's board, not on the board. So I do not need to recuse myself from that vote.
And I just have one more question. Deborah, you made some very good points about sort of getting off this train going forward, and, you know, you talked about 2013. I mean, I heard some talk, but what specifically are we going to do to get off this train so we don't have this conversation every single year?
We can discuss that perhaps, but we have to vote on the budget at this point.
Through you, Mr. President, give a short reply.
I'd really prefer to have the remainder of this discussion at the next meeting. We have to vote on the budget tonight. I'm not sure, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's
that
really
this-
quick. Let me just say, Howard articulated clearly, and we will form a policy for that. And I think we're all in the same place on that.
Do we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. So we do have a motion from Trustee Levinson, seconded by Trustee Rosner. Roll call vote. Trustee Bauer?
Could I, just to clarify, if I would, just to make it clear for purposes of the motion, that would include an amendment to sheet 9 by adding a revenue FEMA grant for fire trucks, $665,000, include an amendment adding an offsetting appropriation on sheet 24A, FEMA grant for fire trucks, $665,000, and an amendment on sheet 30, the reserve for uncollected taxes, to $954,440.78.
You threw me a curveball.
Can I, is this what's sent to the DCA, or is the second time sent to both?
Okay. With all that. Trustee Bauer?
As amended, yes.
Thank you. Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg?
No. No.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Thank you. So the 2012 Budget Resolution 2012-077, as amended, has been introduced and approved. We have scheduled a public hearing for May 14th.
Thank you. We have a number of resolutions on our consent agenda this evening. Could we please have them read by title?
Thank you. We have 5 resolutions. Resolution authorizing the Township of South Orange Village to file a 2011 recycling grant. A resolution appointing soccer referees in the South Orange Department of Recreation and Cultural Affairs. A resolution requiring the use of 96-gallon rigid plastic toters for residential, curbside, single-stream, commingled recycling. A resolution authorizing the placement of a lien on private property for a special cleanup of private property at 346 Academy Street. This is in the amount of $2,528.70. And we have a resolution authorizing an executive session at tonight's meeting of the Board of Trustees.
And the 2 items I have listed for that are Harris grievance and review of volunteer applications.
And want to add East Orange Water?
Do we need to?
No, I don't know.
Well, yeah, we got a memo from council today that I think we need to discuss. It's very time sensitive.
I have to remove
Okay.
myself.
Yes.
Okay.
Recuse myself.
Yeah, I just want to make a point about the resolution, I think it's number 80, for the rigid plastic toters for single-stream recycling. I had a conversation with Trustee Brosner about this over the weekend. You only have to flatten your cardboard, tie it up, and place it alongside the toter if it doesn't fit in the toter. It's not like all cardboard has to be outside, because if cardboard gets wet, if you put it out at night and it rains or it's damp, it breaks down and it's not recyclable. So we don't want people putting cardboard outside unless it's absolutely
I think we spelled that out.
required.
I think we spelled that out in the resolution.
It should say excess cardboard.
Right, excess
flattened.
right. Stuff that doesn't fit into the toilet.
It just says with cardboard flattened tied together with a string and
We
placed
tightened up that
alongside.
language.
We did, that was
Yeah.
fixed.
Okay, good, great, thank you.
Trustee Bell, are you comfortable with the language now with the containers? Because I know last time you were not comfortable with that language.
Well, no one else was agreeing with me. If you want to join me, that's fine, but I mean, you know, I've worked for years on this. I'm hardly going to vote against a resolution because it only gets 85% of the way there.
Okay.
But I will be looking at the numbers.
We are betting on ice cream on this.
One more than that.
Can I put my trash can in the tote? I think I'm going to have to do that and throw it out that way.
Regarding ice cream, I'll go with the winner.
Is there any more discussion, or do we have a motion for that consent agenda with also that one
second it.
executive session added? Could we have a roll call vote, please? Yeah. Yeah, we said that last meeting, we're going to do a roll call vote for all the consent agendas going forward,
Thank you.
because they involve money.
So that motion was seconded by Trustee Levinson.
Yes.
Thank you. Trustee Bauer, roll call.
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford.
Yes.
Trustee Goldberg.
Yes.
Trustee Gould.
Yes.
And Trustee Levinson.
Yes.
Trustee Rosner.
Yes.
Thank you. So the consent agenda did pass upon roll call vote.
Thank you.
A list of bills audited by the village treasurer dated March 18th, 2012. Each member of the Board of Trustees has been provided a copy of the bills list prior to the previous meeting. It wasn't on the last agenda, at which we should have voted on. I move that we accept the bills list.
And Robin, there was that one change to Regan's invoice that was modified. That's right.
Yes, that's been held right now, and we've communicated that back to Greg Fehrenbach, and we've since been in communication with Regan Burkholder as well.
Okay. He invoiced us for a salary survey that we failed to see.
But we haven't received it yet.
We haven't received it.
Right, which is why I asked you to be held.
I didn't know if we received it or not, and it's been in hiding or limbo or something.
So there was a motion.
And we just-
I second with that correction.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. Trustee Bauer?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
She just abstained. Trustee Goldberg?
Yes.
Trustee Gould?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
And Trustee Rosner.
Yes.
So the bills list was approved upon roll call vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to open up for any public comments at this time again.
I like the resolutions with the end of the
We're only halfway through the meeting. And if I can just ask folks to limit their comments to 2 to 3 minutes, please.
Thanks. Nancy Gagne, Executive Director of the Community Coalition on Race. I just want to clarify some of the things that I heard you discuss. I appreciate the discussion and your attention to our efforts to provide the services that we provide for both South Orange and Maplewood. We believe that the service level agreement that we've provided and edited and resubmitted does a fairly good job of demonstrating the return on investment for the township, and that there are services for the $22,500 that we have asked for, which is, first of all, let me backtrack. We're in existence for 15 years. I'm there for not quite 4 years. I know that the amount of money has decreased over time. At one point it was at 38, went down to 35, now we're at 22.5. So it's not 20 or 22 years. I don't know what the total is over the course of the 15 years, but that would be interesting to find out. But for that 22.5, we believe that the services that we provide the community exceed the amount of that expenditure, and we feel the same way for Maplewood. We serve all the residents of both communities, all ages, everyone who lives here. We have programming that speaks to building relationships and housing stability, market stability, and that affects everybody. We have made a regular practice of coming before you about 3 times a year to show you where we are in our programming and events and with the work of our committees. We try to provide as often as possible hard numbers, so if there are questions about the service levels, we can refer back to those or provide new information. In terms of the new budget line, the workers' compensation and payroll taxes, we were informed at a workshop that we went to by the IRS that we were not in compliance with our employee status. We then contracted with Pro Bono Partnership, which is a legal representation. That's a service that's provided to us for free. We worked with 3 lawyers to maintain our status as contractors to the coalition. They told us that that was impossible. We had to be hired, and that was an unfortunate increase in our budget. Frustrated us, but we have to be in legal compliance. So that explains, I hope that explains that change. In terms of the discussion about different organizations and YouthNet, we have benefited from YouthNet's student interns in the summers. We take our internships very seriously. When they provide us with interns, we mentor and train them. We don't just ask them to do tasks, but we really work with the students and try and provide them with, so we feel like it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And in fact, in terms of providing a service level agreement, the Maplewood liaison to YouthNet, Jerry Ryan, asked for a copy of what we wrote for Maplewood to provide to YouthNet so that they had something to model on. And we hope that that was a support for them as well. Okay.
I just have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay. And the last thing is the figure of $11,000 as the in-kind provision for taking the space and some other benefits from being in the space was a number that former village president Newman put out during that budget workshop in the spring of 2011. It was a thumbnail sketch, and we went back when we did the numbers. I presented to then Administrator John Gross that it would actually amount to about $6,500 because there were certain things that could not be provided by by South Orange Village. So that is what we were talking about, and that's where we got hung up, that to abandon our space for $6,500 without some cash on top of that was going to put us in a difficult position with Maplewood. And we did offer another proposal to John Gross. It keeps, unfortunately, these proposals are happening in mid-year when we've already paid our insurance, we've already gotten our lease with Ethical Culture. We would like to be able to work with you on the in-kind at a future date. date, but it's going to have to, the timing has to be better. So I'll leave it at that.
Nancy, can you clarify that? Because we've never heard a formal response with respect to the offer for the in-kind space. So are you not taking that for this calendar year, or are, you know, can you tell us what your intentions would be?
We submitted a proposal, this was last summer, to John Gross that outlined, once we went over the numbers with him and with our budget, what would be covered by the in-kind services. It added up to be about $6,500. And we put, our trustees asked that I include in that a balance of cash support. We ended up getting cash support last year. We said we would reconsider the in-kind service with a balance of cash support for 2012, but it didn't go any further. I never got a response beyond the proposal that I submitted to Mr. Gross at the time.
That's helpful, because we didn't know that. We didn't see
Okay.
it.
We never saw it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time?
My name is Carol Barry Austin, 125 Reynolds Place in South Orange. And I'm going to surprise you all tonight because I am actually not going to speak about the coalition because you've already heard from many of the fine volunteers that work with us and our executive director. What I am going to speak to you about is, as a former chair of the coalition, a volunteer in this community for over 25 years. My husband and I have lived in this community for 33 years. And what I want to say to each of you is that, first, I admire and respect every single one of you for volunteering your time and giving back to the community. But it saddens me tonight, and I've watched, if I'm not at a board meeting, very often I watch the board meetings. And my hope is that just as the coalition, the trustees, the volunteers that have come before you have shown tremendous respect when they've spoken to you, I would ask that you show us the same. And very often that's not the case. This evening it was presented, and I don't know who said it, someone mentioned parading people before you. It's very seldom that I've heard that kind of language when citizens come before you to express how strongly they feel about something, and they're entitled to do that. They call the coalition office and they ask, how can they help? We've got hundreds of volunteers, hundreds of people that donate money to the organization, and in my mind, you demean us all when comments like that are made. So I would ask you to treat the organization with the respect that it certainly deserved over the many years that it has served this community. You may not agree with everything that the coalition has done. The coalition has made mistakes. Organizations make mistakes, human beings make mistakes, but we all try to do the best that we can. The organization tries to do the best that we can. We have representatives, we have liaisons from South Orange, we have liaisons from Maplewood. Our meetings are open meetings. If anyone has a concern, they're welcome to come to our committee meetings. They're welcome to come to our board meetings. They're open. But it is terribly unfair to criticize and make misstatements about the organization. It's not fair. So what I urge you tonight is just to treat us as fairly, equitably as you would any other organization, volunteer organization, where people spend countless hours. Those hours translate into dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to be clear for the record on that one comment, I believe that was a member of the public who spoke at the podium who used that language, not a member of this board. Just to put that on the record. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at this time? Just come up to the podium. You know the drill.
Good evening, Melissa Aronson. Good evening, President Torby, trustees. Why did 5 members of the BOT hire their friend to be a henchman against the Community Coalition on Race?
Thank you for your comment. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time?
I'd like to say something.
Can you save it for new business?
No. Trustees are supposed to talk about these kind of things during public comments.
Okay, well,
changing the format again.
Well, public comments is
question is about the format of the meeting, and we changed it to add another section to the thing. And I think that anytime there's changes to the meeting, it should be vetted by the board, or at least the board should be told in advance about it. I think the whole board should be told about any changes to the meeting agendas in advance. And I also think that when we did public comments, and I know we did this once before years ago, about having 2 sessions in one evening, but we tried to limit it, the second part, to people who couldn't speak the first time or had a different item, so that we didn't have repeats of the same thing. And, you know, why tonight wasn't a problem, you could see it being a problem in the future on certain topics where we could have people come up, speak their minds, which absolutely they're welcome to and open to, but we don't need to hear the same thing twice in the same night necessarily, unless it's something new to add to the topic, and make sure that everyone has a chance to speak, which is what I thought that the point of the second public comments was. But you can explain why you added it and what the purpose was, so that we all know.
Sure. Well, that segues perfectly, I guess, to the village president's report. One of the things that we've talked about in the board meetings before, and in some of our priorities workshops and discussions, is trying to reformat some of the processes. And we've been doing that. We changed our conference meetings to this. We added the committee reports back. We're constantly making changes. I think that's valuable feedback. I'm working on a memo that outlines a number of other changes to the agenda. And I will make sure to circulate that to the board before the next meeting. And that's going to discuss this and a couple other things as well. I think none of these are written in stone. If we try it and it doesn't work, we can undo it. But I think it's important to explore these things. And I can say, at least on this one point, the reason that I wanted to make sure there was a public comment section at the beginning of the meeting was to make sure that the members of the public had a chance to speak before we took action, which was not always the case on previous agendas. So it's important for people to be able to speak before we make any decisions, and I think it's also important for people to be able to speak after we've made a decision. I agree that we don't want necessarily people coming up and saying the same thing twice. However, one of the other pieces that I've discussed with our clerk and our administrator is making sure that we, when we talk about 3 minutes, that we actually use a timer and we keep people to 3 minutes, and that, it's not someone up here that says, okay, it's your time to stop, so it's not political. It's a stopwatch that goes off after 3 minutes and that's it. And that will help streamline the process and make sure that the comment periods don't get too out of hand. But I'm going to outline all that in a memo to the board, and that will be circulated well before the next meeting, so we can get some feedback before making any more changes.
I have just to weigh in on that. I think that in all fairness, we need to understand the structure of our government. Me, I want to be involved in everything. But with that said, in all fairness, we are the board, and he has certain privileges as the president.
I said that. I said it's the president's right to set the agenda, but you can tell us in advance, that's all.
Okay, all right, so I just wanted to make that clear, I'm sorry. Okay, and the other thing is regarding the timer, in my other role, the timer works. We have this big clock that says 3 minutes, and people self-regulate because they can see it and they don't feel that you're being arbitrary. I think that that would really, really be a real advantage for us for the public session, to set a 3-minute limit. The clock is about this big, I don't know about sizes, that would sit up here where it's visible, and when 3 minutes are up, they're done.
Do we have clock? Do we have that in the budget? Clocks? How razor thin is that budget?
Find the money for it.
But yeah, I'll make sure to circulate those to the board. I want to make sure that I get people's feedback on these things. Again, they're not in stone, but I just want to try and improve this process as we go forward. Mr. Lewis, do you have a report?
Well, in the interest of the hour, I'll try and be brief. I did want to hit a couple highlights. One, I'd like to recognize, I guess, all the village employees, but particularly the Department of Public Works and Tom Machete. They received last week from the Essex County GIF the Safety Award, one of only 4 towns in the GIF to receive it. It's based on 100% compliance. And I'm told by Tom that it's 15 years running we've received it, and it's a credit to the department. It involves training, it involves the track record, and it is probably the single reason that our workers' comp premium is down $30,000 from last year. So recognize them and thank them for their hard work. Real quickly, we are moving forward with trying to get organized in anticipation of the move. We did have it at our department head meeting meeting last week, representatives from Essex County, Mr. Delgadio, and also gentlemen from their records management to talk with all the department heads about going forward in our record consolidation and purging and scanning, and we're moving along on that process. And then just lastly, because there was a couple people that emailed me, just so that everybody knows, we do intend for the next meeting now to put on the resolution awarding the fire truck. And there's also, I think, some police cars that have a time-sensitive deadline that we'll be able to do on the 23rd now that we've got the budget introduced. So I'll leave it at that.
Finance and IT?
Yeah, I have a few comments from the last meeting. One is that we still have not received any financial reports since last November. This is an ongoing problem. The other is that we have a cash management report resolution, which is pending since January, which should be passed, waiting for comments to be given back to us so that we can move forward with that. That cash management plan identifies what reports the board should receive on a monthly basis to get a good handle on what's happening. Part of that, and we've had a discussion about hiring a financial analyst, an outsourced analyst, to help us understand our debt exposure. We have bands, bond anticipation notes and bonds. The bands are short-term borrowing, which basically are at a lower interest rate than the long-term. But as the longer-term marketplace interest rates start to rise, we can get ourselves in a trap because we have some $34 million of short-term borrowing with much less on our longer-term borrowing. And we need to understand how to balance or tranche those debt securities so that we don't get ourselves exposed to high interest rates into the future. I just gave Steve a copy of Montclair's. Montclair has done this. I've had a conversation with the firm that did it for Montclair, and as well as we have a proposal from another firm that provides this type of service to municipalities. It's something that is worth a lot, and not being exposed to kind of the change in rates suddenly that we can get ourselves into. We have a very large debt exposure, and it's something that we need to start to manage.
I think you should add that Barry does think it's a good idea to do this, and to hire this person to be an analyst. And I think you said the cost would be around 10,000.
No, it's less.
Less? No more than
Keep it under that, and there's money in the budget, and I think it's an imperative, and not just a good idea.
So I think, if the board's okay with it, I think we should move ahead with taking this step, because timing is everything on this. Because if interest rates do go up, even just slightly go up, we could put ourselves in a very vulnerable position.
And we're getting close to that kind of situation happening. So the longer market is going to get more expensive.
I'd like Barry to put together a resolution for the next meeting to authorize. No one objects.
Okay, legal? Okay. Planning and zoning?
Planning and zoning, we actually meet, we're meeting next Monday at 7 p.m. We're doing the meeting for the regular planning and zoning meeting. 8 o'clock, we're doing it for the historic commission portion. So there's nothing to report on since last meeting.
Okay. Public safety?
Yeah, I'm going to skip till next meeting. To Mark's point about in the interest of keeping these meetings streamlined, this makes it the worst of conference agenda by having committee reports at both meetings. So I'm going to...
Brian suggested doing them every other meeting, but yeah.
I agree, so I'll skip. I'll give
Is that something that, do you want to only do this, want to say in the first meeting of the month?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Some of our committee meetings fall,
That's right.
different times of the month.
Okay, so we can just keep these on for the first meeting of the month.
Well, or maybe you split 3 and 3, depending on when you're meeting. You want it to be somewhat timely.
Or you just pass. You just pass and give the update next time, too.
Whatever.
We'll talk about it. Yeah. Figure something out. Public Works?
Public Works, I want to, first of all, remind everybody that May 6th, Sunday, from 11 to 4 is River Day, and there's going to be
just said quickly about the committee reports, have them on both meetings. And if you haven't met, because we all meet different times a month, you just pass. Look how quickly we went through this today. So that way we can cover, because if you have it just at either the beginning, the first meeting, or the last meeting, we're going to have that same scenario. So it would behoove some of us who haven't met, just quickly pass, like Trustee Gould just did, and just like I did.
Good deal.
Good example. Thank you. Okay, so we have a number of discussion items on our agenda tonight. The first is the consulting report that was done about SOPAC. There's no action for the board to take tonight, but it was presented in the last meeting, and certainly worth discussing. I think one component of that wasn't here when the conversation began, but that there was also a possibility of a second phase of a report, so that also could be part of the discussion tonight.
All right. I'd like to start off, and I'd like to apologize to the board. When the presenter came up, I assumed that his presentation was a global view, and it was, very easy to understand, and I was so excited about it. And then when I went to review the report, the details.
What details?
There weren't any details. It was really, then I became upset because the amount of money we spent and we didn't have a comprehensive, detailed report. I just assumed that because my experience has that when you present to a general population, you give the global view, but when you have the report, and the warning light should have went on when there was no PowerPoint. With the details. But when I went and saw the details, so the compliments I gave to the presenter, I want to rescind, because there were no details. And so I hope I didn't embarrass y'all with, all the compliments I gave to the consultant that we paid. How much did we pay for that?
Unfortunately, he put that on YouTube and has been using that to get other jobs.
It will live forever, right? But it was I was very, in summarizing in very simple terms, I was very disappointed on the lack of detail.
Did that report
And Dr. Shantros, you were right.
You never thought you'd utter those.
I never thought I would utter that.
I think even if
Really nailed it then.
even if
was
his
right.
message was right, the way it was delivered wasn't right.
Well, that's another story.
But
We don't have time for that.
We do have to take this next action, what we're going to do with it. And
Unfortunately, the report doesn't give us any real insight except write a bigger check.
I think
that's all the report says.
When he set up there, and there was some truth to it, that, and how we're going to take back the building, and
That's
what,
true.
and what the level of contribution is, and so forth and so on, but it's like, I know we've been through this before, and it's almost like we have to have 2 or 3 representatives from this board and Barry meet with the 2 or 3 lead members of SOPAC and hammer this out one way or the other. They continue, and you didn't mention the big failure has been the fundraising from the public. Never mind the fundraising from the board, which has been fine, or especially fine because of 1 or 2 board members, but they still have failed on the fundraising almost from day one, not to raise the amount of money that have been talked about over and over, and the fundraising effort has been a complete lack because they don't have the money to hire a
But let's be
fundraiser.
fair. If you look at the model of these type of things, this was all done and this came from the past president. No, it's fundraising it has not been done from the public. I mean, we still have to live with the pain and the financial burden, but most of these type of entities, you have a vision, you have seed money, and then the public funds a vision. Now they don't want to fund the debt.
They said from day one, when they originally did, the fundraiser failed at that level. And
NJPAC was very successful, whatever, and I know because I was part of supplying them staffing. They started in the
And
small
the
office.
original fundraiser we hired had done work with NJPAC also, so I understand all that. But at this point, from going forward, that's been the real
But the
failure.
board has contributed, the board members.
Said that.
So I guess the
But
question
I
is,
really would like 2 or 3 board members to hammer this out with 2 or 3 of their board members of how we're going to do this, how we're going to go forward, and really come up with a real plan for the contribution level, something that's more
There's a piece to that, and that goes back into the discussion about the financial analyst, because a lot of the bonding that we have, the package that we have in debt wraps around SOPAC. There's a fair amount of debt exposure. And that's part of what we need to wrap and understand how to refinance those bonds and how to refinance the building.
Mark, to your point, well, first to put a stronger point on Deborah's point, I mean, this report was an absolute disgrace. I mean, it's not worth the paper it was printed on. I mean, clearly it's something, it told us all nothing that we didn't already know, and it's really an embarrassment. The presentation didn't really help a whole lot more either. I actually sent a note to Mr. Harak during the week, and surprise, surprise, he didn't even have the courtesy to respond. But I did share with him my disappointment in the report. So, and to your other point, Mark, the question now is what next? I mean, Nancy and I did try 2 summers ago and sat down with several board members.
And so does Howard the summer before,
multiple times,
right?
and Howard and Mark, I know you guys did an iteration as well, and that was the whole hope and goal of having an outside consultant is maybe a third party would help. But
I'm actually suggesting not that we do a study to see where we are, but to say, I want to hammer out an agreement of what we want to do going forward. And, if that agreement is how we're taking over the building and how we're taking over whatever debt there is, just put it out there, get it done, and stop beating around the bush, or, we're really dancing around what we all know the answer is already, and we might as well do it.
I agree with that, but just for my own personal clarity, so that this part, I think the only thing a value that I took away from that is in my understanding that SOPAC would be challenged with grants if they have this debt, that if the debt is removed from them, then they would be in a position to be
They'd be in a better
successful.
position. I don't want to say they're going to guarantee that they're going to get any grants. because
So
of
if that is true, then that's part of what we need to think about in whatever discussions and decisions are made. Okay.
I think that's fair, and the SOPAC directors reached out asking to set up a meeting about this. I don't know if, Mr. Lewis, you also got that email from Michael Bollinger, but maybe that's something that we can just go ahead and set up, and I don't know if there are maybe 2 trustees who want to join myself and our administrator.
It should definitely be Nancy and Howard. Howard's financial, Nancy's
You can
already
volunteer.
engaged.
We're doing it. Tim went before, exactly.
So you already know the...
Yeah, we know the Jerome.
Okay.
But there is a new executive director this time, so that might, because that was before Michael came, right? Yeah, I think this will.
Yeah, he was very interested to talk about this and figure out what to do. So we'll start to get that together.
And I would also actually, at some point in the conversation, you may want to also invite Seton Hall to one of the meetings to go over their original commitment and making sure that they're going to honor their original commitment going forward, because they were a partner in this agreement. We want to make sure they remain a partner in this agreement. They may even want to up their role at some point, as originally promised.
Okay, the Red Flex automated red light cameras.
I'd say my most exciting thing was I decided the other day to actually, when I had home from time, I went and stood at 3 different corners just to do my own 15-minute monitor at each one, just to see how many people drive through red lights besides Howie, did my own counting, and I will say that the count I did at 3 different, Scotland, Sloane Street, and Ridgewood Road easily won over any other of the intersections, much more than Scotland. And that little 15-minute sampling, it was pretty bad. I mean, cars see yellow light and they think that's you have to for the accelerator. And then if one car goes through, then 2 other cars have to follow through behind them, even though the lights already clearly turned red. Because if that car can make it, they can surely make it. And it seems to be absolutely, Sloane Street was actually fairly mild and fairly calm. It wasn't really, it's hard to tell what the right turn on red if they really, but, and Scotland Road, it really wasn't, I think I only saw 1 car in the 15 minutes. But Ridgewood, I think there were 9 cars in 15 minutes that went through a red light. So I was, based on my informal 15-minute sampling of those 3 intersections, I would say that I felt a little
Trustee Rosner, undercover.
I felt we'll just hire you, Mark. I felt a little more comfortable saying we might be a good idea to try doing the to try the camera installation. I think, I don't see how it would work on Stone Street with the right turn on red and the constant motion of people going through and stuff like that, and people getting hung up because they're waiting for pedestrians to cross. So.
But the other intersections that are probably logical candidates, right? Right out here at Scotland and up at Wyoming, for example.
And Center Street.
Right.
And, yeah, Wyoming and South Orange where the school is.
Yeah.
I think there's a problem with having the right turn on red. I talked to the lobbyists afterward, but I think since they do a much more in-depth study of the intersections, because obviously they want to have an effective program at the intersection.
You didn't think that was in-depth enough?
I think we should go forward, see the situation. I wasn't going to say that. But now that you brought that up, that's a good segue, because I don't know how many of you actually looked at this Newark data, and he also told me there's a robust report coming out looking at a lot of municipalities from DOT. But the Newark data, at Mulberry Street, after they gave out 845 tickets, there was no reduction in crashes whatsoever. Of course, there's probably better behavior, and that's one of the reasons I'm going to vote for it, because the chief said there would be better behavior, so I'm going to put my trust in the chief. At Broad and Market, there were 247 citations, and it dropped from 20 crashes, which is nothing for Newark, to 15. So, I mean, and certainly we have less of a crash problem than Newark does. This was a really amazing one. Raymond Boulevard and Market Street, 13,000 tickets given out to reduce crashes from 16, only 16 at Raymond and Market, to 6.
Is that over a year?
But Janine, just to be fair, if one person is really seriously injured or critically injured, and it saves that person, then it's worth it.
That's why I'm going to vote for it, but I don't think we should be doing it with the right on red, because,
No, I have a lot of problem with the right on red one.
It's far too complicated.
I especially have a problem with Stone Street. I would not agree to do it at Stone Street at all.
It's far too complicated. Even Scotland Road, I think, is
problematic there.
I think there are other ways to attack calming the traffic down so that people don't accelerate at the yellow and so on and so forth. But
I think we should empower the board to be able to write tickets when we're down there so that we can.
Well, I think it's also worth noting that as far as the process goes, the village would be deciding to move forward with looking into this, but we wouldn't actually be making the decision. The New Jersey Department of Transportation would be deciding whether the intersections that Red Flex chose with our police department, right, that whether they're unsafe enough to even warrant the cameras. Looking at New Jersey versus the way some other states do it, New Jersey actually seems to be a little stricter, where they actually create this process where you have to go to the state and you have to get certification, so towns can't just, cover the town in red light cameras and, fund the budget for the next year. It has to actually be a legitimate safety concern, and if there's revenue gain from that, there is, but there has to be a demonstrated
But I agree
problem.
that Slotin Street
And it
should
also,
be removed.
New Jersey, I think the limits on what they use the cameras for is much stricter. Some states were using it
for speeding.
For speeding and for checking license plates, and I don't think the Red Flex can do that in New Jersey. So.
But we will make decisions. In other words, if we say we don't want it at this intersection, that's fine.
That's right, but I mean, for any moving forward at this point in the discussion, we're not saying, yes, we're putting them up at those intersections. Just would be asking the police department to work with the company to analyze, and then it would go to the Department of Transportation. We're probably a year or so away from even anything happening.
Yeah, I don't see this as a long-term revenue saver. I think this is, maybe a short-term revenue gain. I would doubt that it's going to be long-term for Red Flex. Well, for Red Flex, right? I think there'll be some safety improvements, and I think there'll be some minimal revenue after the first year.
So do we need a resolution for the next meeting authorizing the police department to work with Red Flex and finding those intersections? I'm not totally clear on.
I think the next step is for them to submit an application to the DOT.
Well, I think, we went out to an RFP, and there were 2 vendors. I think we have to essentially award a contract to Red Flex, and then they, as part of that contracting process, they do the evaluation.
Okay, even though we're not paying them for anything, so the contract.
I would still feel more comfortable if we passed a resolution just authorizing the deal.
Right.
Whether we're legally required or not, I think we should do it. I understand that.
All right, well, we'll talk about what action needs to be taken in the next meeting.
We'll have an option in the next meeting.
Okay. All right, thanks, Chief. osmosis, thank
Are
you.
you letting the chief go early? Oh, come on. I'm gonna be here till
Be careful
midnight.
driving home from the door.
Add some more cars. I think you've seen the biggest increase in some states, so those people will buy those plastic things to go with the license plate, so that you can't read it, between the Easy Pass.
I don't think those really work anyway. Sorry to ruin your plan.
I was gonna see if we had any indication of how many people have those things in town. What? Yeah, right. I don't drive anywhere.
Okay, trustee Bauer had an item here requesting an ad hoc committee to examine potential improvements to Chisowitz.
I tried to be self-explanatory. I do have a question as to why the form doesn't print out so that you can actually read it. Can we fix that?
Why what?
Yeah.
It wraps, the wrap
So I
is
already
wrapped.
sent a
Comes in,
nasty
the way the
email.
form comes in on
Oh.
the account.
But what were you trying to print?
The form.
Robin
You made me
printed it.
fill
You were
out
printing
the
the
form.
form
I
and-
fill out the forms, and when it's
see how they
copied
get
and
printed?
printed,
What
it's like
form?
off of both
In the
forms.
emails that we get back. All right, I'll look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, that should be easy.
So I nominated Mark, Howard, Nancy, and myself, or three of us, to deal with that.
I do have some comments, because we actually had started to talk about this in the rec committee. So I had reached out to Wayne Eastman, who is the facilities guy at the Board of Ed, and Jerry Ryan in Maplewood. And because of the Board of Ed elections, we kind of have not gotten anywhere in getting a meeting together. The other thing, I don't know if you knew that Cougar Soccer had come to clean up the field.
Yes.
And immediately after doing that, it was vandalized again. People are bashing their cars or trucks through the fencing there. They have it closed off. They're trying to bash through and break down the fencing, and there was graffiti that Cougar Soccer volunteers had painted over, and then 2 days later, a day later, it was graffitied again.
Wow.
So it's a security issue, as well as other issues there as well.
It's definitely a security issue.
Yeah, we need the camera there, that's right, Howard's got it, the camera, the Redflex camera.
As I told Janine, I would be fine being on that committee.
Okay, so Nancy and Mark?
Are you sure this can't go to a committee that we already have? You don't want it to go to Public Works or Rec? I mean, it's kind of a little
Is
bit.
Mark on rec?
Mark's on rec.
Oh, yeah, send it to rec.
Okay.
Okay, we're attempting to deal with it because, it looks to me as though, and Kate, because Kate and I went and did a walkthrough, that the Board of Ed is sort of taking over the field, they're encroaching, yes, they're encroaching on the field.
Encroaching even more, you mean?
Yes, debris and such.
Okay, when you discuss this, would you invite me to that meeting, please?
Absolutely.
Okay, because they are looking for a response. I would like there to be a formal response.
Who's they? Who's looking for a response?
They is Kathy Leventhal as the point person to the Maplewood Greenway Committee.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
She wasn't
Chisowitz is
invited,
not
Jerry was
in
invited.
the
so.
River Greenway jurisdiction, and they think it is, and they keep asking me, and so I'm putting it in the right committee to deal with it. But if you would just invite me to the meeting, I would appreciate it.
Okay, maybe I should invite Jerry and Kathy.
Whatever you want to do. And by the way, Wayne Eastman, I was delighted when he took over facilities, and I approached him immediately, and he immediately deferred to Beth, who's been dealing with the Greenway, and Andrea, who's actually on the Maplewood Greenway Committee. So that went nowhere, just FYI.
And of course, we don't know what's going to happen until April 17th.
Well,
then.
That's
true,
right,
too,
that's
but-
another issue, maybe talking to somebody else.
Kate, I mean, we know we're not losing Beth and Andrea, so.
Okay,
Because I'll go to Rec and you'll.
back in rec, I'll
Okay.
get on it.
All right. We have a brief update about East Orange Water Commission from Village Council.
Yeah, I forwarded,
No, this is public information.
Okay.
I forwarded information, responses that we received from Mr. Evanstein's firm regarding potential conflict. I also advised the board, has sent a copy of a letter I sent to Judge Klein requesting a conference to move this issue, clear the air with regard to any conflicts of interest, and address the appointment of the special master. The judge has not responded as of this time.
to speak
track it
into the
down
mic.
themselves through-
You need to speak
through
into the mic.
Whatever it is, Water NJ, there's a website. The alternative would be,
Water Watch.
yeah, the alternative would be to put the link, but then the person would have to go track it down, so we'll just pull it off and, right, okay.
And Barry, on the topic of website updates, we also be updating the information about the reassessment
Yes.
and the calculation as well. Will that be done this week?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item, amended and restated charter, which village council has written up.
Bless you.
Is there anything that you want to go over with this, or is
No,
this?
just the primary issue on the charter, which is right up front down the attachment to the ordinance that I submitted, is alternate section 1, which before you vote on the ordinance, you're going to have to decide whether or not post approval by the state legislature, whether you want to submit it to a referendum vote. That's really the only open issue right now, unless one of the trustees feels I haven't clearly reflected all of the amendments proposed.
I had that one question about treasurer.
About the treasurer? Not a required position, and that was a...
No, but it's referenced, the clerk shall in a couple of places.
Oh, okay.
Under the definition of clerk, it says the clerk shall from the treasurer.
I will do a search on treasurer and address that.
I think we talked about doing it by referendum at the Charter Review Committee. So I didn't really object to that, but it does lengthen the process by another eternity. So.
And it becomes an all or nothing, up or down vote, right? So ultimately, this entire process could be rendered moot. I think if we were doing substantive changes, that some of the things that were proposed, I would be all for it. But I think most of these some of the changes are not substantive.
That's true. That's true.
Although there is one larger change, which is when we talk about the elections. And we had talked about in a previous meeting, possibly doing that by ordinance. That struck me as odd, perhaps. We had talked about it, and it seemed like maybe a good idea to move forward doing it separately. I'm not sure why we wouldn't put it in with the rest of the charter. So we would have the wrong election date in the charter for a period of time, and then we'd have to pass an ordinance to change it.
I actually had Steve and I had an exchange, and I thought maybe a better solution is for the charter to simply remain silent on the election date, because that's governed by the state. So if we did nothing, the state says we're nonpartisan, our election's in May. So just remain silent on it, and then determine, as Mark had suggested, determine the election date by ordinance. Make it totally separate from the charter, so that way, to your point, they're not out of sync and contradicting each other.
But I guess what's the point of doing that outside of the
The point
charter?
you're doing is that if we do move the elections at one point to November, and it turns out to be it turns out that future boards want us to change it back to May for whatever reason, maybe, that'll be an easier process than changing the charter to reverse the election to May. And my concern is further enhanced by the fact that we already know that the county clerk is having trouble with the balloting on Board of Eds, and fitting everything in and adding these things on to our voting machines as they exist today, which may or may not be a problem in the future. But that was my reason for doing it. So
That's an interesting, I hadn't thought of that, but that's a very, very narrow reading of all of this language. But maybe that works. Maybe that works. And if I understand what you're saying, is if we did it pursuant to the ordinance, we couldn't revert it for another 10 years.
Right. But we can't do that anyway, right? We can only change your election.
I'm not so sure that you couldn't amend the charter in a short period of time.
Well, that's true. But except for amending the charter is a much longer process. It could take 10 years just to go through the amendment process again. We've been doing this for
the last charter change, nobody really moved it.
No.
It was submitted and everybody let it go.
I know, but still.
Any piece of legislation, you're going to have to.
But even this particular review process, which started a year and a half ago, year and a half ago, and we're still not done, and still has to go, I mean, it's a 3-year process, really, for changing the charter.
Although on something as substantial as an election, it's probably not a bad thing.
Well, we have the state statute that guides us. Nonpartisan is in May, unless we elect to.
You still can be nonpartisan if you move it to November.
Right.
And it's the only reason why I would support moving it to November for the cost saving, if, you know, since this, the consensus is that we want to remain nonpartisan.
I guess the point of keeping it in the charter, at least in my mind, would be that it makes it more difficult to move it, which is a good thing. The difficulty in moving your municipal election is a good thing. You don't want to be able to just move your election based on whoever comes into office as well, new ordinance, or having a new date.
You can't do that, though.
Then why do it by ordinance?
There is a time frame. You have to wait to do it by ordinance, right? Yeah, what's the minimum?
If you change it by ordinance, you can't change it back for 10 years.
So, I don't see how that concern is.
Is that by ordinance, or is that just in general?
State statute. That's state statute.
Provides that.
I'm sorry, the statute provides that if you change your election by ordinance, you can't change it again for 10 years, or if you change your election, you can't change it for 10 years.
That's the form of government. If you change your form of government, you can't change it for 10 years.
If you change the date of your election, if you change it from May to November, you can't change it back to May again for 10 years.
But that's regardless of whether you do it by ordinance or whether it's in your charter.
No, by ordinance, because it's in the statute that relates to the power to do that by ordinance. And what I thought Trustee Rosner was saying, if you do it in the charter, maybe you can bypass that.
It's silent in
I'm afraid the charter review is going to be longer, you know, but if it's, and I don't know why it should be in the charter anyway. Our charter calls for the town to be nonpartisan. It shouldn't dictate that anymore. If the election date, you have a choice between May and November for election date, I don't know why it'd be so important. We don't really say in our charter now that the elections are in May. There was no choice before now. We said we're nonpartisan, therefore the elections are in May.
Well, it does say it is in May, currently.
It says we're nonpartisan, therefore the elections have to be in May. But now that doesn't make any sense. The elections don't have to be in May. The elections can be May or November. So we have to say we're nonpartisan still, which to me is a much more important issue.
So it should be silent on the date, is what I'm saying, right? I think what we're all suggesting.
But it's not a deal breaker either way to me. If you think I'm going to hang my head, this is not a deal breaker.
Well, my only concern is just, you know, the public's level of involvement in these kind of decisions. And it just seems like if it's by ordinance, that's something, even regardless of the time frame, a board could come in and say, well, we want to move it this way or that way, without, I mean, the charter review is lengthy, but, you know, that's kind of part of the democratic bureaucracy, is that it takes a long time and people have a chance to come to the meetings and comment about it. So it's unfortunate on one hand that it's a lengthy process, but on the other hand, that makes sure that the decisions are made.
Tell me what's not been a lengthy process in this village.
To tell you what hasn't,
If you wanted to move
I'm at a
it,
loss.
but if you wanted to move it back, you would have to do it by ordinance.
Well, either way, you have to do it by ordinance, because whether you're gonna send the charter change to the legislature, you're doing it by ordinance, or if you do it pursuant to the statute, you have to do it.
There may be some
And an ordinance requires a public hearing.
Yeah, but the only thing that you
Somebody's
you don't wanna have is an
Excuse me.
election date change by ordinance and having another date floating around in your charter, which I think was the point that President Torby was making.
Yeah, so the problem's been solved. You just say silent on it, that we're nonpartisan, and we do an ordinance when the election is. I don't really see what every ordinance is every board always discusses it first, and they have the ordinance. There's a reading and the first reading and a second reading. There's plenty of chance for public input. And I don't think any board's going to change an election date and take it lightly. I don't think they're just going to do it for a random purpose.
I don't know if I agree with that.
But why would you think somebody would do it for a random purpose?
I mean, that's kind of hard phrasing to assign a definition to. But this is, I mean,
that's why
the time of the election, I won't hang this up too much longer, but the time of the election is a, pretty critical piece, one way or the other, of how our government functions. And it's, I think it's more important than, an ordinance. And that's why when takes this long. You have to have a committee, you have to approve it, it has to go to the state legislature. There's a reason why that process is so lengthy.
But what was the vote of the board to do?
What was your question?
With the election, what was the prevailing?
I think there was consensus to move the election.
To November,
Yeah.
right? Now, if we do the charter this way, where does it stand? It doesn't stand until we pass an ordinance.
Right.
Yeah, so, if the prevailing, yeah. What do you want to do? I don't really care what the board, if the board wants to keep it in the charter, we'll keep it in the charter. I think it's better if we do it by ordinance.
You have a vote, not me, so. I don't agree. I'd say
I value your input on this.
Thank you.
I agree with you, Mark. I think it just, again, if, originally Steve was talking about doing both paths. I think the easiest path is have the charter remain silent and do it by ordinance, and that way there's, whichever one gets approved, first.
But we shouldn't be doing this what's easy. That's, I don't think that's the right decision as far as deciding. No, but that was a correct statement. I mean, it is the easier one. The more complicated one is to make it be part of a lengthier process. That's more complicated, it takes longer, and it's more inconvenient.
But it is
That's the only downside.
But it is a lengthy process. It's every 10 years, at the minimum, every 10 years, as council said. So it's not like someone can do this ad hoc, willy-nilly, let's make it, you change it from year to year. I just don't think that's gonna happen. I think we're overthinking this.
I don't know. I'd like to see all of these things go to the voters on a referendum.
But on the other side of it.
But didn't we do that already?
Moving it to
We did, but the board has expressed.
We did that already.
Move the date anyhow, even without the charter change.
Right. And I think
Which you can do now.
if you put the date change in the charter and you do it to a referendum, I think it's going to muddy the water. Some people are going to say, "Oh, I wish they changed this. Oh, I wish they didn't change this," and they're going to vote again. The whole thing's going to go down in flames, and we're going to be back to exactly where we started. For a variety of different reasons, I think this is one discrete piece. I think everything else that might be the remotest bit controversial. I think the rest of it is so non-threatening. I don't think anyone would have any problem with any of the other changes that it requires.
It's an interesting statement because the voters asked the board to make two changes that the board expressed consensus not to make. So, when you say there's no controversy, I don't understand that because we did ask the voters, and unless everyone on this board is voting yes the same way the voters did, which everybody on this board isn't, then there is controversy. Because the people came to the polls and they said to do two things, and one was to change the names of the titles, and one was to institute stipends lower than what the committee recommended. And the board, in our discussion last time, expressed some consensus not to do either of those things. And compounding that is the fact that the committee recommended putting the elections on the ballot, and the board didn't put the elections on the ballot, yet is taking action on that. So I'm confused because although we did put two questions to the voters, they asked for action, we're not taking action. The question we didn't put to the voters, we are taking action on. To me, that doesn't seem transparent. And putting everything on a ballot at the end of the day is transparent. And it gives people a chance to say, no, we went to the polls and we had a public opinion referenda, and we asked you to do these two things, and you did neither, so we're voting this down.
We said up front it was non-binding, and that's...
So you just ignore it? I mean, what's the point of doing a public opinion referenda?
I made my opinions up front. I was not going to use the referendum as a cop-out on paying the people that serve this community. I made that clear. Anyway, I think that's a red herring. I think you're muddying the water by lumping everything in a binding referendum. It's an up or down vote. This entire thing is going to go down the tubes, and then we've just spent 2 years doing for nothing.
Well, unless we're doing what the community wants us to do, and then it won't go down in flames, it'll be voted yes, and we'll move on with the community support.
Because it's a single up or down vote. It's a nuance. Some people might like X, but they don't like Y, and I think it muddies the water.
His point is we don't know if the same people who voted for the stipend and for the title might not be the same people who voted yes to the title change. So you could have people get annoyed at one, then vote the whole thing down.
Right.
Just because.
Of course.
Okay, so, and it's the same thing with the, and I think because the stipend vote was fairly low.
All right, y'all, I'm getting cranky. Let's move,
Getting?
please.
Well,
All right, we're dithering here.
I do have a question of council. Can we pass an ordinance independently to change the election day?
Yes.
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 No, but we can't do it until the charter's changed.
No.
The charter says they have a May election. that's why.
No, but the statute says you
Oh,
can
okay.
override a special charter with an ordinance.
It's moot point.
So what you're saying is that we could do it, we could do an ordinance regardless?
Right.
Right. I think that's a
May I make a
fair point.
request that we bring,
Why don't you make that?
I'm not sure where they're at.
Save us having it.
oh, gosh.
But so
It's the
I,
messenger.
I still have a concern. I don't know if, you know, if it's something that we can address tonight. But the question that comes before us of whether we should put this on the ballot or not, I would say if it was not controversial and, you know, and everything, you know, everybody seemed to agree on everything, then sure, why not? But, you know, the fact that the board was unwilling to take action on the two things that the voters asked for, I don't understand why we wouldn't, A, why we wouldn't do that, and B, why we wouldn't just put it to the ballot and let people decide.
I think in all fairness, the only controversial issue is the stipend. I don't think anything else is controversial. I mean,
Then why aren't we taking action on both those items?
I agreed to a stipend. It wasn't me who disagreed. So you have to ask people who voted against it.
I'd be happy to ask people who voted against it. You know, I mean, if we're going to put something on the ballot for public opinion, and people ask for all three things, and we're not taking action on two of them, and the one that we didn't put on the ballot, you know, we're expressing intent to take action on, to me, that's just not transparent. And it was a very, very lengthy process.
Transparent's not the right word. Transparent's not the right word. We're incredibly transparent. You may not like it, but it's transparent.
No, I would disagree with that, Trustee Goldberg. I think the process was transparent that resulted in the recommendations, sure. But the action that the board's taking at this point, I would say, no, it's not transparent. The most transparent thing to do would be to put all of them on a ballot and let the voters decide. That would be the most. It's non-binding. It's not non-binding. That was non-binding, but I'm saying to put it on a binding, that's the most. I mean, you can't be any more transparent than saying, we've gone through all of this, and certainly all of us are free to lobby, you know, to our own accord on what issues we think are important.
We should put charter version A and charter version B on the ballot.
I don't know if we could do that. That would be,
And then we should put Faulkner Act version on the
I think that's the
ballot.
next step.
It's not the next step, that's why I voted against it, so I'm completely transparent. Why change anything? I mean, we have this anachronistic charter, it's ridiculous. Doesn't have anything to do with yes or no, or consensus here or not.
I guess my opinion is that unless the board is in a position to take action on the two items that the voters asked for, that we should put the whole thing on the ballot.
After the legislature approves it.
That's correct. That's not my top priority because it lengthens the process, but if they, right, don't let them watch this meeting.
Because you have to sponsor.
But then if it fails, I mean, 90% of the changes are housekeeping, compliance with state law, or gender changes, or things of that nature. So if that were to fail because somebody's holding a grudge about a stipend, we now have a charter that's in conflict with state law and archaic. It doesn't make any sense.
I'm not sure that's any worse than asking the voters what they want us to do and then ignoring it.
It was non-binding, and that was clear.
Of course, but then, I'm not trying to sound, hostile at all, but, we can't use the excuse it's non-binding if, to just not, then why do it? Then why even ask? I mean, why put anything on the ballot? But to say it's non-binding is to say that we're ignoring it, is to say that we're not using the information, because they didn't decide. So we'll ask them, and we'll let them, think that they have some input into the process, but we're actually gonna make the decision ourselves. So
They don't like it, they can vote us out during the next election.
Well, if they don't like it, then they should be able to go to the polls and vote the entire charter up or down and say, we approve of the way you did this, or we don't approve of the way you did this. No, it's not, thankfully.
What's the question?
Why don't we take a straw poll, referendum, yes or no?
I think your point's fair, that most of these things are fairly innocuous and it's okay just to have the board
objection, come speak during the public hearing and express their opinion during a public hearing.
But if you didn't take the opinion when they went to the polls, why would you take their opinion when they come to a meeting? I mean, what's the point of someone
I
coming
was
to a
very
meeting if they
careful
went to
with
the,
I was
say,
I was taking the opinion of some. I think there are some issues that are better understood when you're actually involved in the process. And some things which may sound very simple and reasonable, and you're not involved every day in local politics. And so maybe we're too close for some things, but I think there's a different viewpoint from people who are on the board. And this did come out during the Charter Review Committee process. There were sometimes the viewpoint of Janine, myself, and Doug were different than the rest of the committee. And I think that sometimes it comes out very differently. And I have to vote what I think is best sometimes. And it doesn't always agree with the majority. And by the way, the majority is not always right. But sometimes, otherwise you never would have had George Bush as president.
I don't disagree with you. I think we're just fooling ourselves.
He didn't win by a majority, though. I forgot that.
I think we're just fooling ourselves a little bit as to how much stock we're putting in the public's opinion at this point in this process. I mean, we're kind of ignoring the recommendations the committee made and ignoring the recommendations.
I don't think ignoring is the right word.
Well, I haven't heard any argument. I mean, we haven't. I don't think we've had substantial discussion on these issues. I think people expressed what they thought, and everybody made a speech the last meeting, and then we kind of moved on. That's not really discussion.
I think we had discussion. I just don't think you agreed with
It went on ad nauseum, and not only that, for people on the charter review, I mean, it was, how many meetings? 28 meetings? I mean...
Well, no, they did it. I think they made, a number of good recommendations, but I didn't see that the board discussed it to the level that they did.
And I would hope to God they don't discuss it.
But so, I mean, maybe this is my misunderstanding of like a committee process, but as you task the committee with performing some function of studying the issue, researching it, analyzing it, making a recommendation, so that we don't have to do all of that, but then usually that goes along with taking the recommendation from the committee.
Which point do you want to
It doesn't mean anything. It could be rejected. We could have said, we're not doing Red Flex tonight.
If you look at the SID advisory committee,
anything with respect to what the committee's doing.
The SID advisory committee presented very specific recommendations. We adopted some, we didn't adopt others, but in whole, we agreed that there should be a special improvement district. Same thing with the charter review. We accepted some, we didn't accept others, but in whole, we accepted the idea that the charter should be revised.
I know, but what irks me is that we then asked the voters what they wanted, and they told us, and now we're not doing that. The voters. We were all elected by the voters. Thanks. So, look, people will make the decision that they'll make tonight. I just wanted to make sure to try and do my part to persuade the board members that, that the...
Which one do you want us to change our minds on? That's why I just don't know.
I think that the committee recommended and the voters also approved changing the names of the titles and doing stipends.
I think.
And I didn't hear substantial arguments.
I have to tell you that I very often find that ballot referendums are often designed and questioned in such a way that the answer is yes, and that people don't, and you often see the majority of these things that win or that pass are because of the yes vote, and it takes a very strong public effort to change the vote or educate the vote. And one of the things I did say to Charter Review Committee was that if we're going to do this in a public, there should be some kind of public thing to make sure people really understand, which I don't really think everybody understood all the nuances or anything, although I understand it's not a big deal between calling someone trustee or council member. It certainly doesn't matter for most of us. I know that you and Deborah have a different position about it because you deal with the county and the state more often all the time, and we don't, and so it's really not that important to the ones of us who are just dealing locally. But there were several people who came up here and gave reasons why we should do it, for the history of the town, for the uniqueness of the town.
Yeah, but hundreds of people, if not...
And the other issue was the stipend, which was the other major issue, which was a fairly close vote. I forgot how close it was, but it was fairly close. I think that was still, even though I voted it in favor for future boards, not for this board, but for future boards to get paid a small stipend, I do know that would be the hot button issue, and that could be the thing that would cause the whole whole charter.
But on the
which is
council
why-
title, only
which
one
is why-
person came up and made the
Doesn't mean they're not going to vote
history.
again, doesn't mean they're going to vote in favor.
Only one person.
But this is why I also pushed very hard for a review of the process of how we can put in for reimbursements, if any trustees feel they need to put in for reimbursements. And, you know, I don't think that we can't change the whole issue of the whole issue of stipends again in the future, you know, and now, does the charter specifically say no pay, everyone's a volunteer position? Yeah, so, you know, but it's,
But I mean, we did the due diligence, you know, you looked at it, you looked at all the different towns, we compiled the data, we looked at the information, we went out to the voters, the committee made the recommendation,
and some board members didn't.
What are you trying to suggest? You want to break it apart?
I would say that we should take those recommendations, those two recommendations, or we should put the whole thing on the ballot again.
So we're doing a do-over from where we came from before?
I don't know if it's a
We've had this
do-over.
discussion already.
You already had this.
Tonight is Groundhog Day, like we're repeating conversations we've already had.
We said we would come back with a charter revision.
Right, but tonight, one of the discussions that we have to have is whether we put it on the ballot or not. And what I was expressing was my opinion that if we're to make those decisions that we expressed in the last meeting, then we should have no fear to put it on the ballot and let the public approve of.
It's not about fear. Why don't we just take a straw poll and see if we want to do a referendum or not, and just get to the chase? What do people want to do?
We can certainly do that. That's fine. That doesn't allay or mitigate any of the concerns that I've raised, but obviously I'm 0/1 vote, and I just wanted.
Now I'm confused, didn't we already have it at a
Yes.
at a referendum?
It's non-binding. I think he's looking for a binding.
Right, well, the process is such that we can ask the public opinion on a referendum, which is what we did, and then we have to adopt an ordinance. That ordinance goes to the state legislature, and then it's optional that we're allowed after that point to then have a referendum on the next ballot that gives the voters binding approval over whether an up or down vote on the entire process, which I have to say I was totally against in the beginning of it, because I thought the committee was a very transparent process, but from that point forward, I don't feel that it's been. I've said what I felt, and people have, made their responses, so, the board is certainly free to move in the direction that it wants to. I just wanted to make sure we had that level of discussion, which I didn't feel we had yet.
So what am I doing?
I think what the board's intention is to take the language out about the elections, because as Trustee Levison said, we could do an ordinance anyway, so there's no sense to have it in there. And then it sounds like the board would like to introduce an ordinance approving this restated charter without a binding public opinion at the end of it.
Second.
Is that correct? That wasn't a motion, but.
We don't have to make a motion for this.
No, we just need to bring an ordinance, because this is an opportunity for people to give any feedback on the restated.
Well, I would like to, and if there's not a strong feeling one way or the other regarding, the one thing that I will argue for is to change our titles from trustee to councilperson.
We've had this discussion.
I know. Then I'm not going to vote on anything.
Well, it sounds, Trustee Goldberg had suggested we take a straw poll on whether we put this on the, for a binding question afterwards. So, you want to go around and take that straw poll?
What's this thing that the straw poll is about?
The straw poll is whether trustees would like to place our charter on the ballot after it's approved, assuming it's approved by the legislature, for a binding up or down vote by residents.
Our charter being what we have.
No, the restated charter.
The restated, yes. So what we send to the legislature for approval to then put for an up or down binding vote after it's.
I thought we didn't have to make that decision if it came back from the legislature.
Well, it has to be in the restated charter, right?
Wait.
I want to see the
The
document.
question that was just raised is, do we have to make the decision about whether we ask for a binding vote afterwards now?
Yeah. Because
That's clear.
it's is the final approval process. So it has to be in there. It has to be in the attachment. I put all of the good stuff in the charter, none of it's in the ordinance. The ordinance simply says we're approving submission to the legislature, what's attached.
So that straw poll. Let's start with trustee Bauer or trustee Ross?
You want me to go first then?
Sure.
I'm actually okay. I'm leaning towards putting it, doing it, have the board do by ordinance. I think it's have the board vote on it, not a referendum. But I will not object to a referendum.
So that's a no.
That's a no.
That's a no.
The referendum.
Yeah, no.
Make that four.
And, yeah, and that's, the administrator just pointed out an important issue that, given the way our elections were set up, there's no lame duck under the current.
There's no what?
No lame
Like the
duck.
president's term starts like almost immediately.
Yeah, no, like president, trustees
Or the
too.
trustees
There's no
as
lame
well.
duck within.
Whereas you shift to November,
within
normally you
days.
wait till January 1st.
Yeah,
Are you
So you're
going that
gonna-
route,
yeah.
or are you
Well,
going like
you
the
have
first
to,
week
you
of
have
November?
to.
So we would have to.
You have to. You're gonna have a lame duck.
Yes.
Yep. You'll understand.
But just those provisions have to be changed.
Yeah.
But then we have to change the charter to this where.
No, we wouldn't.
Is that
Just
also-
take that all out. We're gonna say in accordance with law, because you're gonna say that we passed the ordinance.
By definition, when your election's in November, you take office January 1st, right?
But that's not statutory, is it?
You will have a lame duck.
No, because there are nonpartisan towns that have May elections that don't swear people in 6 days after the election.
Yeah, understood, but that's what you have now.
That's not our Faulkner Act towns, they're Faulkner Act nonpartisan towns.
That's why
We're not.
You have a system that nobody else does. Simply because you have a May election
many times
doesn't
have we
mean you
said that?
look like other towns that have a May election. You look very, very different because you have this special charter. You do not have lame duck sessions.
Can we have a November election, have a November swearing in as well?
I don't believe so.
Because you have to be,
I don't believe so. But now, we could try. We could try if you want to put it. If you want to put it in the charter. Hold on. If you wanted to put the election change in the charter rather than the ordinance, you might be able to get that passed OLS.
Then you have a reorganization.
You might be able to do that. But if you're going to do it pursuant to the ordinance, you're going to have to follow suit what everybody else does. And you're going to have a lame duck session.
Okay, but to finish the straw poll, we got 4 no's down.
I have 3. Who is the 4th? Trustee Goldberg, thank you.
For the record, do you guys want to be on the record for what straw poll? Should there be a referendum or not?
I just want it to be decided amongst us.
Okay.
So that's a no. Janine?
No.
Okay, I'm definitely for a referendum because I think that the public would vote for this, notwithstanding the fact that I agree with you that it definitely muddies it up because you'll have the Amy Dunn's saying this and that, every interest group will have their own little thing, the pro-money people, the anti-money people, so on and so forth. But notwithstanding the fact that I definitely think it should go to referendum after it comes back from the legislature, I'm completely against sending this to the legislature, and I will campaign to defeat it at the referendum because I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we are restating and passing a bill to stick with this ancient anachronistic process.
Yes.
How many times tonight have we said, no one else has this? And this,
Yes.
every negative phrase that we can,
I don't see those
Just
as
so you
negative.
know.
I didn't see those as a negative, saying no other town does this.
Well, they're not positives.
they're not positives. They're not.
That I
positives.
agree with. I'm confused.
We gotta get with the program, but yes, I say public referendum and then I'll.
So narrowly
campaign
defeated in the
against
straw poll. If people have any more feedback about this, they can send it to village council, and we'll have an ordinance for either the next meeting or the meeting after that. Would be our first.
I sense that Alice is going to run in 2013 to switch to a trustee so we can vote no to this.
Interesting.
And this was a straw poll, I can always change my position.
It was non-binding.
That's right. Okay, so that's that. Oh dear. Village Council, you had done some research. I know you had found a whole bunch of information. I don't know, I don't know if we got that. No, so maybe we can discuss this next time and get that ahead of time and do some light reading before the next meeting.
I don't think it's like reading.
Yeah, there's, here, let me explain. It's too bad that trustee Gould is not here because this is her pet. And
Well, we can wait till the next meeting.
There are aspects of the research that have confidential aspects to it that I really shouldn't discuss in public. But here is one of the things that you have to understand. Once again, and this has nothing to do, well, it may have had something to do with our special charter, but we are a one-of-a-kind school system as well. And we have a very, very unique reason why we have a Board of School Estimate, because of the way the school system was created in the first instance. And so, Trustee Bauer, if you're going to go to a major charter change, you may have to do more fixing than just our local.
I think Trustee Bauer will be happy.
But I am right now finishing up on some historic research, both in terms of how we were created, how we separated, how the legislation that we have today that affects our school system came about. OLS is doing some research for me, going back to 1905. And I hope to have a pretty thorough
I have a headache.
memo to you as to why your need for a Board of School Estimate is very different from any other Class 1 school system that has a, and by the way, we're number 2, not a 1. So I'll have that for you, I hope, shortly.
Okay, so we'll get that memo and then we'll re-add it for discussion. Is there any new?
And one point of information on this whole idea of moving the election, we've been waiting for the resolution or the signing into law of S1328, which was the bill that would allow our unique district to move the election.
It was signed in. You didn't find it?
No,
It's signed
no,
in.
it was passed by both houses. It was not signed by the
It was
governor.
not signed by the governor.
It was passed by both houses back in February 16th or 17th. My understanding is after 45 days, if it's not signed, it automatically becomes law, not veto. That's my understanding. Council, I defer to you. But, and it's been about 45 days.
As long as the legislature is still in session.
So yeah, maybe that's all right.
So we'll look into the status of that.
I will definitely.
Okay, is there any new business? No, is there a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Second.
Move.
All in favor?
Aye.
So adjourned.
Thank you,
Got all those
Stephen.
votes.